So, hello and welcome to Thursday, 20th November's David 67 Celtic live stream. Good to see a few people have joined already. Hopefully, we're going to have a nice, pleasant, polite, respectful live stream without any rude words, swear words, nastiness, etc. Great. Welcome to you, Paul Maguire 3382. Nice to have you back on. Nice to have you on Green for Go 1969. Nice to have all the regulars. Also, Monty 4035 on again as well. So, just wait to see whether a few more people turn up and we'll get going. Obviously, at the moment, still quite a lot of uncertainty around the club with the ongoing search for a new manager. Yes. So at the moment, as I said, still quite a lot of speculation as to whether Celtic are in the process of getting a new manager, just when it looks like things are starting to come to fruition, get to some certainty. There are stories coming out of the Columbus Crew general manager, so effectively their chief executive officer, saying that Celtic haven't as yet put in a formal request for compensation with their manager coming to Celtic. According to lots of people who claim to be experts and claim to have inside sources, so journalists from the Daily Record and the Scotsman and the Herald and various different people from Hail Hail and various other Celtic fan sites, Celtic Star, etc., who claim to know all the inside gossip and all inside stories. The story was that last Friday and Saturday and Sunday, Celtic board members and executives were having negotiations with Wilfried Nancy, the manager of Columbus Crew. Then stories coming out at the start of the week that they're all falling apart, and then new stories saying that it was all resurrected and it was all going to go through. All going to go through, and then reportedly the general manager is saying, the chief executive officer of Columbus Crew saying there's not been a formal approach from Celtic to Columbus Crew regarding £2 million compensation. That was the reported fee, and which staff Nancy is going to bring with him across the Atlantic. And some stories saying that Celtic were trying to get Nancy in place for the Saturday game against St Mirren, now saying that it most likely would be the Hibs game the following weekend, which probably makes a lot more sense. Good evening to you, Clashman Numpty, one of the long-standing subscribers and viewers to the channel from day one of the channel 2 and a bit years ago. Green for Goat. So Stephen McGowan in the past seemed to have an inside knowledge at Celtic that doesn't seem to have been quite so accurate with the various different events in the summer transfer windows and the all the ins and outs of the Brendan Rodgers situation. He seemed to lose some of his inside sources. Certainly this season, Columbus Crew, I thought they came sixth, but the sixth or seventh, much the same. They got knocked out in the first round of the playoffs. In a best of three, they got knocked out in the third game. Thing to remember is last season, so far at Columbus Crew, he's won two trophies. He was manager of the year in 2024. So previous season, he was manager of the year in the MLS. The year before, when he was managing Montreal, he won the Canadian championship. So if anybody's watched the videos about Wilfried Nancy, his tactics, the way he plays football, he's certainly a very forward-thinking manager. But whoever we get is whoever we get. It's down to the board. It's down to the chief executive officers. It's down to who wants the job. Monty, I have said this 1,000 times before. Yes, I think the biggest criticism I would have of all of the board members, the executives, and the club in general is the lack of communication. My personal feeling is that people like Michael Nicholson and the financial officer, the head of the physios and medical department, the recruitment person, Paul Tidsdale, all those people should be doing one or other of them should be doing press conferences or press interviews or videos on Celtic TV, etc. I think 2 or 3 people from the board, stroke executives, and the backroom staff, i.e. the medical staff, the physio staff, the recruitment, the scouting, all these people, there should be press conferences, videos, newspaper stories, all these things on a weekly basis, twice weekly basis. I think these people should be putting themselves up for interview and press conferences, etc., on a much more of a frequent basis. Most other chief executives of companies, organizations, health boards, all these kinds of things are much more visible in the press, giving a lot more press statements, either directly by themselves or having a press officer who gives a weekly. The only reason that I would like to hear from the medical staff, the physio staff, is the uncertainty over what is the proposed recovery spell for Kelechi Iheanacho, Marcelo Sirachi, Callum Osmond, Jota, Alistair Johnson, Callum Osmond, to say, well, we keep on getting, we've got no idea when Jota's coming back. We've got no real understanding of just what surgery Osmond and Carter Vickers and Johnson have had, whether there's a chance they'll be back for the end of the season. All these, so I personally think it's an important thing to know when these players are coming back, when Kelechi Iheanacho is coming back, because that could have a big factor in terms of who's brought in during the winter transfer window. Similarly, the recovery rate for people like Osmond and Johnston and Carter Vickers. Do Celtic need to sign another centre back? Depending on what manager Celtic want to get or are going to get, you might want some form of hybrid. Well, not really, because the manager doesn't actually know half of these things. It's quite apparent from hearing any football manager, they don't actually know the real difference between an anterior cruciate, a posterior cruciate ligament, a medial collateral ligament. They don't really know quite what surgery that Callum Osmond, Alistair Johnson's had, what the recovery rate is, what the risk of it is. quite why there are so many people at Celtic having hamstring injuries. These kind of things actually, in many other sporting organisations, are much better dealt with. So personally, I would really like to hear from the physios, the doctors, the medical staff, the sports scientists, as to why Celtic are at the moment so apparently having so many of hamstring injuries, etc. We've got 4 or 5 players out at the moment. It's a perfectly reasonable comment, Greenforgo. We do seem particularly prone to hamstring injuries. Hamstring injuries do tend to happen to footballers, although not 4 or 5 all at once. There's definitely something to be said for getting the strength and conditioning coach staff, the sports science staff, the physios, the doctors, someone from that team to come and explain to us quite why there are so many injuries of that sort and what the club is doing to prevent those sorts of things. And hamstring injuries do tend to happen a lot to football players. It can be a part of overtraining. It can be a lack of not warming up. It can be a lot of different things. All I'm really saying, I don't know whether the Dr. Strangelove, you actually are a doctor itself, but yes, so you can talk about people's recovery rates. You can talk about that the operation. So obviously, you wouldn't detail exactly what operation Callum Osmond or Alistair Johnston's had. It was interesting. There was a feature this morning in one of the channels or one of the newspapers that Callum Osmond's going for hyperbaric treatment, which very much speeds up recovery from surgery. So those kind of things would, for me, would be quite interesting to find out why these things. So we're not talking about medical issues. So we're not saying that so and so's got a certain medical condition. But I think you can talk about general. That's my personal opinion. I can't see why that would add pressure. You think it would add pressure to the person's recovery? Saying that we're expecting Jota to be back in training at the end of December and hoping to be playing by the end of January. That's a perfectly reasonable thing. That the average recovery rate from the hamstring surgery that Johnston and Osmond has is 3 months. Alistair Johnston himself talked about he's hoping to be back a month or so before the end of the season to get himself into the Canadian squad for the World Cup. I think, again, the players, it would be perfectly reasonable to have a doctor or a physio with Callum Osmond and Alistair Johnston, because they both had the same operation, to say the average recovery rate of this is this, that, and the other. We're hoping to be back in March, let's say, or we're hoping to be back for the start of April. So this my personal opinion is that when you watch with lots of other sporting organizations, they are more open about the recovery rate of players, etc. I also enjoy watching some American sports, and in American sports, they're very open with how quickly a player is going to be getting back into the team. There are lots of other sports where the coach or the physios or the doctors, etc., do open up about those things. My personal feeling is that that it's Kasper Schmeichel said he is going to talk to the club potentially about a new contract in sometime in early 2026. I think it probably it probably would be sensible to have a better idea now whether he's coming back for another season or 2 seasons, or whether this is going to be his last season at Celtic. Because I think personally it's a good time to start planning for the future, i.e. switching over to Viljami Sinisalo. I think he's a very good goalkeeper who's going to get better and better. He's never really let Celtic down in the half a dozen games he's had so far for Celtic. I don't think actually personally that one could really blame Kasper Schmeichel for any of the 4 goals in the Scotland-Denmark match. The McTominay goal was absolutely brilliant. The Kieran Tierney goal was absolutely brilliant. He couldn't really do very much about the Kenny McLean shot from halfway line. Argument to say that maybe he could have got more out to the ball for the corner kick that Shanklin scored the deflection with. But I don't think Schmeichel could have done anything with any of the 4 goals that he let in, apart from maybe the Shanklin one. But then his defenders didn't do their job for that one either. He has made some good saves for Celtic this season. He's been at fault with his distribution a couple of times. He was very much at fault, obviously, for that first Braga goal. He's not been quite as good this season as he was last season. Well, the thing was, he wouldn't have been on the halfway line had his manager not told him to go up for it. And there was shortly before the Kenny McLean goal, he did actually intercept the ball on the halfway line to keep Denmark on the attack. So he wouldn't have been allowed up that far up the pitch had his manager not told him to go up the pitch. So it was his manager's decision to go to the top of the pitch, not Kasper Schmeichel's decision himself. Clashman Numpty, it is the AGM tomorrow. It's not something I'm particularly it's not a thing I have particularly followed. I don't think there's anything. I don't think there's any. For me, there's not a tremendous interest in it. It's from experiencing lots of AGMs, not necessarily Celtic AGMs, but AGMs of companies and other organisations I've worked for in the past. AGMs are not really, I don't think it's anything that I can influence. It's not particularly interesting. From reading the transcripts of previous Celtic AGMs, it tends to be more of a shouting match. Nothing really is volunteered by the executives, the chairman, etc. Dermot Desmond won't be there as far as I'm aware. I think tomorrow's AGM is probably going to be a shouting match. I think there's going to be a lot of disputing, and I don't think there's going to be very much information being passed on. But other people are very interested in the AGM. I dare say some people might be going to the AGM. There's going to be lots of different votes to try and get the whole of the board sacked. Can't see any of that going through, but who knows what's happening. Reportedly, Celtic's second biggest shareholder has sold off some of their company's shares. Quite who's bought those shares, whether those shares have been transferred from the second biggest shareholder to the third biggest shareholder, or whether they've gone to Dermot Desmond, I don't know. But several 100,000 shares got moved from one person to another. Yes, so Paul Maguire, I completely agree. I personally would put in Sinisalo. I don't think Martin O'Neill's going to switch to Sinisalo rather than Schmeichel. I would like to see Viljami Sinisalo take over as Celtic's #1 goalkeeper sooner rather than later, particularly if there's some doubt as to whether Schmeichel's coming back next season. I think the deeper it goes into 2026 without there being certainty about who's going to be Celtic's 1 and 2 goalkeeper for next year, it also obviously would impact in the winter transfer window whether Celtic want to sign an experienced goalkeeper to partner Sinisalo. There's some rumours that Celtic in the past have looked at signing Angus Gunn, who's currently at Notts Forest, as their third choice goalkeeper. That might make so if Schmeichel was moving on, it might make a lot of sense for Angus Gunn to come in and be Celtic's #2 goalkeeper behind Sinisalo. So the Clashman Numpty, I'm sorry, there's an awful lot of comments going through, and I'm having a wee bit of difficulty seeing the comments screen. So I can't actually keep up with everything. It's all kind of flashing through. So I do apologise that I'm not dealing with everybody's comments. So the manager hunt, according to the reports that I read this morning, the manager hunt in terms of negotiations with Wilfried Nancy are ongoing, but depending on who you believe and who of all these supposed insiders you believe, some people are saying that it's all fallen apart. The most recent thing I'd read was that Celtic are looking to get Wilfried Nancy in place for the Hibs game, which is obviously not the next game, which is St Mirren, not the game after that, which is Feyenoord, but would be against Hibs a week on Sunday. So you're quite right, Clashman Numpty. The general manager, who is their chief executive, said that there's not been any contact from Celtic as of Tuesday. Now that could be due to the fact that these sorts of things are supposed to, negotiations between clubs for managers, for players, for transfers, etc., is supposed to be kept behind closed doors. These kinds of negotiations do affect clubs' financial dealings, legal dealings, and all these kinds of things. And so it may be that Columbus Crew and Celtic are keeping any negotiations regarding who's coming, who's going, how many of Columbus Crew's coaching staff and backroom staff are coming with Wilfried Nancy, whether that's still all part of the negotiation. Obviously, if Wilfried Nancy was coming to be Celtic's new manager and he wanted to bring his assistant manager who's been with him at Montreal and at Columbus Crew, plus his young French coach who's with him at Montreal and then at Columbus Crew. There's another person who is his recruitment scouting head who was with him at Montreal and then came with him to Columbus Crew. Obviously, it's not much of a move to go from Montreal to Columbus, Ohio. It's a much bigger move for people who may well have children and wives and so on to move from America to Scotland. So that may be part of it. Now, if we remember back to when Ange Postecoglou came, one of the reasons that Eddie Howe supposedly pulled out was the fact that he wanted to bring his assistant manager and coaches and stuff, and they didn't want to move from the south of England to Scotland. So that was part of the reason that all fell apart. I think he also got cold feet. Ange Postecoglou obviously came in with none of his own coaches. He just kept the coaches who were at Celtic from before. So that may be part of it. As I say, lots of people claim to have inside sources. One chap at the record seems to say he knows everything about everything, but it's nothing really come to fruition. But as I said, the most recent thing I saw was the plan is to have Nancy in place for well, Pat McLaughlin, you certainly are one of the experts on all the odds and bets and stuff as well. And certainly, again, if we put trust in the bookies, they do seem to have stopped taking bets on it being anybody other than Wilfried Nancy at the moment. Personally, I would much rather we concentrate talking about things like players, managers, tactics, who we're going to bring in during the next transfer window, all these kind of things. Sorry, I missed the question from Clashman up to a wee bit earlier on. Now, when Jota injuries anterior cruciate towards the end of last season, the expectation was he would be out for 9 months up to 12 months, which would take us, if it was 9 months, that would be him coming back in January. I personally felt that that is more likely to be 12 months than 9 months. It's been very quiet regarding just where he is in terms of his recovery. There was one of the Celtic fan sites who again claims to have inside sources at the club. We're talking about him coming in sorry. Sorry, I have said quite a number of times that we want this to be polite, respectful. Otherwise, it's not much fun for people to participate in this. Okay, and I have said we need to avoid swear words in the comment section. We need to avoid delving into legal matters, etc. Otherwise, there's no point in doing a live stream. So, getting back to the football things and so on. Right, so yes, it would be an interesting combination with Martinez and Sean Maloney. I haven't seen anywhere putting Roberto Martinez as being someone who wants the job. I haven't seen him. Obviously he's got ties to the Glasgow Lanarkshire area. I haven't seen his name anywhere being speculated as coming. So thank you, Green for Go. I honestly, yes, you're quite right. I did this because there's the comment section that goes with the videos and the daily quiz questions and the polls is always pleasant, polite, respectful, constructive, people sharing opinions, not always having the same opinion, but pleasantly discussing things. And I do it because I enjoy doing it. I enjoy doing it because I enjoy talking to other Celtic fans. I'm basically quite a lonely person who I enjoy doing the channel. I enjoy having a chat with people. I enjoy different people having different opinions, but it does need to be pleasant, polite, and respectful. It doesn't need to be swear words. It doesn't need to be nastiness. It needs to be pleasant, polite, etc. And so thank you very much for your comment, Green Frigo. Yeah, so so my personal feeling is that if it is Wilfried Nancy, or actually probably any manager, other than maybe Martin O'Neill, they're probably going to come with. Sorry, I apologize. Sligo boy. It was somebody else. Unfortunately, the comment. I apologize unreservedly to you, Sligo boy. Now under switchblades, etc. I apologize. The intention was another person, not yourself, and I couldn't unfortunately undelete it. My other option with doing this live stream would be to get a moderator to come in and do it, and then he or she could then filter out the comments. I do apologize, Sligo boy. I was intending to block somebody else rather than yourself, so I apologize unreservedly to that. Happily, you're back under a different name, and we can move forward for that. But I apologize 1,100%. I was trying to find a way of reversing that, but I couldn't reverse it. Sorry, go back to this one here. Sorry, I apologise to Sligo boy, who's now under a new name. Yes, so he has got so it would appear that wherever Wilfried Nancy has been, he's brought with him his assistant manager, who's called Kwame Ampadu. There's a young French coach who's kind of late 20s, early 30s. He's also got a sort of fitness coach that comes with him everywhere, and he's also got a head of recruitment and scouting who's been with him at Montreal now I would expect that all those four would probably come across the Atlantic with him. I would think he probably would keep somebody like Sean Maloney, maybe Gavin Strachan, maybe the guy Fotheringham instead. I think probably Sean Maloney has a high chance of being one of the main coaches of the first team, and I think it could be a big breath of fresh air to bring in people with maybe more of a scientific way of scouting players, etc. Which is what the chap who has been with him at Montreal and Columbus has been. Is apparently he's a very scientific person, very good at analysing. He's got very good networks. I think also with Wilfried Nancy coming from Canada and from American soccer, it'll be opening up a different market that we've used a bit in the past with Alsa Johnston and so on, but not as much as we maybe should have done. I think there's an awful lot of quality players. I think there's a lot of quality players in Major League Soccer. I think I may have mentioned last week that the Opta stats people had the Major League Soccer as being the 10th most best league in the world for quality of games, quality of players, etc. Not certain if that's the case or not, but certainly there are some very, very good players in Major League Soccer at the moment. One of my absolute favourite players of Celtic's got at the moment is Alsa Johnston. I think he's a very good player. I think he's came straight into the team. I think Alistair Johnston's been one of our best players ever since he came to the club. There are 2 or 3 players that Wilfried Nancy, if he did get the job, might well bring in. His main goal scorer, his main striker for the last couple of seasons has been a chap called Diego Rossi. I did a wee profile video of him earlier today, if people want to watch that. But Diego Rossi looks very much like a Dies and Midas style player. He can play as a centre forward, he can play as an attacking midfielder, he can play right wing and left wing. Yep, so thank you, Lauren, for that comment as well. Yes. And generally all the other live streams I've been on before, the Rye Mum and 8, the Celts are here, the Come On the Hoops with Keith, all those people, they have certain standards of of the language and what gets on the screen and these things. Thank you. Yes, so thank you for watching the video on Diego Rossi. He looks like a player who's got pace. It looks like he's a player who's got good striker's instincts. He's right-footed, he's left-footed. He's pretty good for a player of 5'7". He's pretty good in the air. Much the same as Kyogo, who was 5'7" as well, was pretty good in the air. He, as I say, so Wilfried Nancy often plays a 3-4-3 or a 3-4-2-1. However, looking at his season this year with Columbus Crew, he often swapped into 4-4-2. He actually is a lot more adaptable and changes his tactics from game to game and his formations from game to game a lot more than we tended to do under Ange Postecoglou or Brendan Rodgers. Both of those two tend to stick to the same tactics and the same formations. What Wilfried Nancy and his coaching staff and his analytical staff do actually change the way they play from game to game. And as I say, one of the central players in that flexibility is this player. Sorry, just if we lost a wee bit of connectivity there, the cam for some reason or other went down. Anyway, where was it? Yes, Diego Rossi. Diego Rossi quite central to the way that Wilfried Nancy plays at Columbus Crew, in that he does play as a centre forward, he does play as an attacking midfielder, he plays right side, left side. Sorry about that. Let's see, there was a wee problem with the camera. Hopefully it's all sorted out. So hopefully we can all carry on in being pleasant, polite, respectful, no rude words, no nastiness, no swearing, and no nasty insults going back and forward. If people don't want to participate in that sort of live stream, just fine. There are other live streams out there who maybe want to talk more about the politics and legalities, etc. I would much rather talk about speculating as to what players Celtic should buy in the transfer window, which positions we should look to reinforce. Do we think there are better options who are willing to come to Celtic to be the manager other than Wilfried Nancy? It looked like Kjetil Knutsen, the Bodo Glimt manager, he's not keen to leave Bodo Glimt. He looks like he's still got plans to keep on going at Bodo Glimt. Similarly, Kieran McKenna looks like he doesn't really want to leave Ipswich at this time. Do people prefer that we keep Martin O'Neill to the end of the season? I think if we kept Martin O'Neill to the end of the season, that's going to cause problems in the winter transfer window, assuming that Celtic are going to spend lots of money in the winter transfer window. I think certainly if we bring in a brand new manager in December, as looks like it may well be the case, there's no sense not backing that new manager in the winter transfer window. I think Watson of Kilmarnock is a very obvious player for Celtic to look at. He is a young player. He's Scottish trained, so that helps with the UEFA quotas. He's been playing a couple of years, 2-3 years for Kilmarnock in their first team. He plays a position where Celtic could do with reinforcements and a bit of versatility. I think he ticks a lot of boxes that's for the sort of thing that Celtic want. I think he was a player that another player I would have wanted Celtic to go after was Lennon Miller, but he never. As I said, my intention with was nobody. My intention with was to put people on a temporary timeout type of thing, which is what was supposed to happen. But unfortunately, due to my clumsy fingers, I pressed the wrong button on and accidentally froze your account. I apologize. I can't apologize any more than I've apologized. I was trying to keep on talking. I was trying to concentrate on the screens. I was trying to press the right buttons, and I pressed the wrong button. So I can only apologize. Hopefully, we can all move on. Nobody asked me to reinstate anybody. It was an idea. It was a temporary pause so people could all calm down and move on. But as I said, and as a couple of people have said, we do want to be pleasant, polite, respectful, and be grown-ups, because we all are grown-ups. Anyway, so I'm sorry, Switchblade, Sligo Boy, you've had to use a different account. I don't know how to reverse that. No, you're not on the naughty step. You are not on the naughty step. As I said, I pressed the wrong button. I pressed on your post rather than the person I was putting on a timeout. I personally, Clashman Numpty, I wouldn't be averse to there being some new blood on the board, which actually comes to one of the things I was wanting to talk about tonight. One of the things I was wanting to talk about in the live stream today was, yes. So thank you very much for being so magnanimous Switchblade stroke Sligo boy, and whenever I see your Switchblade come up, I'll know it's Sligo boy. And I do apologise. You were not meant to be put on the naughty step. It's because of my clumsy, thick fingers that I pressed on the wrong comment, and it seems to be irreversible. Anyway, the question I was wanting to ask people to see what people's opinion was: is there a role for, assuming that Martin O'Neill does move on in the next few weeks or month or whenever, and stops being the caretaker manager? The stories are that Sean Maloney is going to go back to the role that he had. I personally wouldn't be the least bit surprised if he's not part of a more active part of the coaching team, but we'll find that out. So the question would be, is there a role for Martin O'Neill at the club after his caretaker job ends, such as on the board, as a director of football, or as a sort of club ambassador? Obviously, at Liverpool, Kenny Dalglish became a club ambassador and seems to have a pretty active role at Liverpool in terms of behind the scenes with things like sponsorships and sponsorships and ticket packages and all these kind of things. So Clashman Numpty, that you're entirely right. Martin O'Neill is based down in London at the moment. However, things like obviously with modern day technology and all these sort of conference call, video calls, etc., I think it's entirely possible that you could take a fairly active role and coming up to Glasgow every couple of weeks, every month, etc. And after all, he does come up on a fairly regular basis to be a pundit in the studio or at pitch side for various different channels when Celtic are on TV, be it in Europe or be it in domestic games. So I don't think it'd be terribly much more for him to come up to Scotland. But a couple of times I've seen it being mentioned that O'Neill might have a role taking over on the board, being a sort of liaison person, being a person who maybe is involved with selling the club to new players and so on. Thank you, Paul Boy 67. I obviously Lewis Capaldi, a tremendously successful singer and songwriter and stuff, so I'll take it as a compliment. Yes, so Paul Maguire, I think that the intention Celtic certainly have is to keep Martin O'Neill in place until the new manager is in. I think with employing any brand new manager, it's always going to be uncertainty. Although Brendan Rodgers was successful the first time around, and he was successful second time around, when they brought him in to replace Ange Postecoglou, there's obviously going to be a bit of uncertainty whether he's going to come back to Celtic and be just as successful as before. There was also obviously quite a strong feeling at the club regarding Rodgers having left the club previously, etc. So I think there was some uncertainty with that. So I think employing any brand new manager there's going to be uncertainty. I think one of Celtic's difficulties is the quality, the level of manager they can probably attract to come and manage in Scotland. My personal, I think I would agree with that as well, Paul Boy 67. I think that the signing of Wilfried Nancy, if that's what it's going to be, I think it's going to take a bit longer than would be ideal. And I think that's part of part of that is also the fact that he's liable to be bringing quite a lot of his backroom staff with him. And that might well take some convincing for several people to leave America and come to Scotland. I think 2 or 3 of his backroom staff are, well, one of his backroom staff is British, a couple of his backroom staff that he takes with him everywhere are French. I think one of them is American or Canadian. So maybe that's much more difficult. Yes. So I think from if one believes the stories and believes the insiders who claim to have this expert knowledge, Wilfried Nancy is very keen to come and manage in Europe. That's always been his intention, was to come to manage in Europe. I think he sees Celtic as being a better option than a couple of the French clubs who are said to be looking at getting him to be their manager. I think he likes the fact that coming to Celtic, he's got a high chance of getting lots of trophies, lots of league, cups, medals, etc. He's got a chance of doing well in Europe as well. I think his way of playing football would be quite a different way of his tactics, his formation that he tends to stick to would be something that might actually be very useful in Scottish football. I think the way he plays football is actually quite a good way of breaking down the low block that so many teams play against Celtic. And as I said, watching various videos about his time at Columbus Crew, especially with various different clever coaches and stuff who analyse his tactics, he is a manager who changes the way he plays from game to game to game. He analyses things, he puts in little tactical tweaks to maximise the team's strength and to maximise how to exploit the other team's weaknesses. I think, well, clearly Brendan Rodgers coming back to Celtic was a success. We won a couple of doubles. We were on the verge of another. We're in the semi-finals. We were second in the league. So by all the indications, Brendan Rodgers was a success second time around. The question would be whether maybe employing a different manager rather than Rodgers would have taken the club further and further forward. It felt like the club, for me, certainly stagnated or maybe went a wee bit backwards. Again, I think that's multifactorial. But it felt like Celtic became less and less attacking, more and more of a possession team, more and more lateral passes, more and more slowness. And we didn't seem to be moving forward on the pitch or off the pitch. So I personally think if we did employ someone like Kjetil Knutsen or Wilfried Nancy, that definitely would be very much a forward move. Well, certainly I don't think bringing in Wilfried Nancy for the Feyenoord game next Thursday is a go. I think that would be asking too much of anybody. One thing might be to a lot of the stories are suggesting the Hibs game on the following Sunday. So, i.e., maybe appointing him on the Friday, giving him Friday, Saturday, Sunday to get together with the team. As I said, I think whoever, if it is him, I'm certain that 2 or 3 of Celtic's current coaches would stay at the club. I think it would be asking too much of any manager, head coach, etc., to come from American soccer to Scottish soccer, football rather, and not have 2 or 3 or more local coaches to speed things up. Obviously, that was pretty much what's happened with Martin O'Neill. He kept all the remaining coaching staff, the Strackens, the Woods, etc. he promoted Sean Maloney. He got Stephen McManus. He got Fotheringham, and etc. Yes, so I think, Paul Boy, the question would be really personally whether it's better if we are going to get a brand new manager, whether we should get that brand new manager in time for the Hearts game, which is December the 7th. Obviously, the week after that is the St Mirren League Cup final. There now seen quite a few people suggesting that they should keep Martin O'Neill in place as a reward so that he can manage in the cup final. I think personally, my personal feeling is if Celtic have decided to go with a certain manager, they should get him in as soon as possible, simply to give him as much time as possible to get used to his squad, his players, to assess them all on the training pitch, on playing actually in actual games, so that when it comes to January the 1st, he's got a good idea of where his squad needs to be improved. He's got time for all his analysts and his recruitment staff also to weigh in on that. He maybe has a good chat with Maloney, has a good chat with Martin O'Neill, also to see where they feel Celtic needs to be improved, etc. So I think the sooner we get in a brand new manager, the better. I think the Hibs game or just after the Hibs game would be a very good time to do it, because after the Hibs game, we've got the lead into the Hearts game on the 7th and then the St Mirren Cup final on the 14th. So that's probably, for me, the best way, because it gives them a month to learn the players, learn the squads, to get all the analysis going for scouting and recruitment. Obviously, in the interim, between September and now, Celtic scouting and recruitment staff presumably have been looking at players. It would appear under Rodgers that Paul Tisdale had a very big role in player scouting, player recruitment, player targeting, etc. He reportedly has had some form of analysing system, much the same as Hearts are using. It would appear that Hearts' system is better than Celtic system. It's a good point. Noah Patsy 10. As I said, my personal feeling from all the stories and all the history with Wilfried Nancy, he is a manager who seems to be able to go into clubs very quickly, much like Ange Postecoglou did when he came into Celtic 2021, and very quickly get over to the coaching staff and the players how he wants to play football. And I don't actually think there's probably that much of a difference in that Celtic actually, apart from the fact he likes to play three centre-backs, but he likes to play full-backs who are attacking full-backs. Now, Johnston, Donovan, to a lesser extent, Ralston are all bomb up and down the right-hand side. Sirachi and Tierney, previously Greg Taylor, all of them were actually very attacking full-backs. I don't think there's a massive difference between how Nancy plays and how Postecoglou played in particular, apart from having that extra centre-back. So I don't think there's probably that much of I think, and also, as I said, that if Nancy did come in or whoever comes in, there would be several of the existing coaching staff that would remain as well, which would help him sort things out. So I'm glad you're back, Sligo boy. It's why I'm always reluctant to put people on a temporary hold or whatever, because there are a lot of comments going up and down on the right hand side. That's why it's taken me all this time to put a temporary block on somebody. Anyway, getting back to football things. Yeah, so the again, Clashman Numpty, as usually, you've done your homework. Certainly at Montreal, he was far from a yes man, and certainly at Columbus Crew, he has not been a yes man either. At Montreal, he told the owner of Montreal to get lost, to get out the dressing room, that it was not the job of the owner of the club to come and berate the players and berate the coaches. And so basically told the owner of the club to get lost. And the owner of the club said, fair enough, I won't interfere with you anymore. And again, when he went into Columbus Crew, there was quite a lot of changes going on in the background. The previous owner left Columbus Crew to go and be an owner in Texas. And Wilfried Nancy very much shaped the way the club was reborn in Columbus. So he is far from a yes man. And he doesn't seem to enjoy any kind of outside influence. However, he is quite willing to abide by the rules and regulations, and what he's agreed to is what he agrees to, and that's what he sticks to. When they changed the parameters in Montreal, he told the board, the owner of the board there, that he wasn't accepting it, and they backed down. And I dare say, if he did get the job at Celtic, that would be the same thing here. There would be agreed boundaries, there would be agreed rules, there would be an agreed budget for player salaries, there'd be an agreed budget for scouting, recruitment, and for player transfers. Yes. So that's the story I read, was that he told the owner to get lost. That's a wee bit similar to what happened with the Nuno Espirito Santo at Nottingham Forest. He told the chairman at Nottingham Forest to stop interfering, and the chairman sacked him. However, at Montreal, the chairman at Montreal, the owner at Montreal, backed down, and Montreal went on to win the Canadian Championship that season. So I personally, I'm not massively. So yes, so Celtic. I think Celtic, by the nature of the fact that we are in Scotland, we're playing in the Scottish League, which is a very low prestige league, even though we've got the prospect of Champions League football on a very regular basis, or certainly got European football on a every year at Celtic. There are constraints in terms of what quality of players that we can attract. That's part of the reason I'd be much keener if Celtic looked a lot more to the domestic market rather than buying so much from Europe. I think buying from smaller areas like America and Japan in terms of transfer market sizes, I think both those leagues have got a lot of really good players. And a lot of those players are actually keen to come and play in Europe. And I think Celtic, by their nature, are a stepping stone club for many players to move into the bigger leagues. So like players like Edward and Dembele and O'Reilly and Jota and Tierney, but then Jota and Tierney have both come back. So I think those are the constraints. And to be fair, the constraints that Nancy had at Montreal and at Columbus Crew are much the same as the constraints or boundaries and so on that he would have at Celtic. Quite a number of the players he had at Columbus Crew have moved on to bigger leagues and bigger clubs. So I think Nancy is quite happy working within certain parameters and certain rules and regulations. But from his reputation, he is not a yes man. He's a man who negotiates the boundaries, negotiates the responsibilities, and then devolves the responsibilities to his coaching staff, his recruitment staff, etc. And he happily works with the owners or the executives, etc. There certainly has been speculation that Martin O'Neill might stay at the club in some form of advisory role. People have talked about director of football. I think director of football would require him to move back to Scotland. I'm not sure he would want to do that. I think his whole family is based down in the London area. People have also talked about him being being co-opted onto the board as a non-executive member. I think there could be a lot of merit in that. That would be a role where he wouldn't have to be in Glasgow quite so much. He could fly up every couple of weeks for board meetings. Obviously, you can carry on board meetings, etc., via video conference and so on. So, I think personally there is a definite. I think having a person like Martin O'Neill at the club could be a very, very positive thing. Actually, quite a number of clubs have retained people like Martin O'Neill, kind of in a backroom role, kind of the Dalglish office at Liverpool. Not want but a player like John Gregg at Rangers has had this sort of backroom, job for years and years and years, but particularly worked well, it would appear, at Liverpool with Kenny Dalglish. And I think Martin O'Neill would be a perfect example of a perfect person for that role at Celtic. Yes, excellent point. The nature of Columbus. So Columbus are a relatively small city in Ohio. There are a lot of much better funded teams throughout American Soccer League, the Major League Soccer, and he did a tremendous job on a relatively small budget. And that also is a big draw in terms of how he likely would manage at Celtic. Obviously, Ange Postecoglou worked under similar parameters and similar financial restrictions in Australian soccer and in Japanese league as well. So again, he did a great job at Montreal and a great job at Columbus on a relatively small budget compared to a lot of the bigger, more funded teams. So so certainly looking, I think Sirachi is out for a couple of months probably. I wouldn't expect Sirachi to be back in 2025. So I think he's going to be out or maybe not till the very end of 2025 at the earliest. However, Sebastian Ciniecki was taking part in training this morning. So was Colby Donovan. So that's a really good sign because he was stretchered off playing for the Scotland under 21s about a week ago. So Colby Donovan was taking part in training. Sebastian Ciniecki was taking part in training. The only people who weren't taking part in training were the people who have had operations. So Carter Vickers, Osman, Johnston, Kelechi Iheanacho wasn't part of training. Dyson Maida is not back from international duty, and Kasper Schmeichel seemed to have an extra day off because he's not back till Friday. But otherwise, Celtic, and obviously Jota's obviously still out as well. Sirachi's not back. And the three who've had operations aren't back. But Ciniecki was back. He looked like he was fit. He was running about. All the other players were running about. So Ciniecki, I would expect, will be fit for Saturday's game. But Iheanacho and Sirachi won't be. And obviously the ones who've had operations plus Jota won't be back for Saturday. Yes, so Sligo Boy. If there are several very, very good videos on YouTube about Wilfried Nancy. I put a couple of them into the community section of the channel. Very interesting analysis by an American Major League Soccer expert person who does a YouTube channel of the way that he sets up his team, his flexibility. So really good watches to do that. And there are quite a number of actual videos of his time in Major League Soccer. And he does appear to be a very interesting person, quite a philosophical person. Some very interesting ideas about how to play football. His mentality is very similar to the Ange Postecoglou version of playing from minute one right to the last whistle, playing everything at high pace. He very much encourages width from the fullbacks. He very much advocates that getting lots of players in the box. He likes his centre-backs to be able to pass the ball. A lot of his tactics rely on one of the centre-backs, often who's a bit of a hybrid defensive midfielder centre-back style of player, to pass through defences. Quite a number of his goals rely on either the two attacking midfielders dropping back into midfield to help there, and then sending passes to the wide fullbacks or getting the players to go wide, but also very keen on passing through defences as well, with quick runs by the striker or quick runs by the wide players or the attacking midfielders. He's a potentially very interesting, very innovative coach, and as I say, has a reputation for adapting his tactics and formations from game to game to game to exploit weaknesses of the other team and to accentuate the positive things and the strengths of his own team. Sadly, well, it does look like Alistair Johnston's out probably till March, April time, but at the moment, both Ralston and Donovan are fit. On the other side, obviously, we've got Kieran Tierney on the left-hand side. There is the option, if Celtic ever wanted to use people like Austin Trusty and Liam Scales as left-backs as well. Certainly, Austin Trusty was playing as a left-sided centre-back for America, played apparently a very good game for them in a 5-1 win over Uruguay during the international break. Both Scales and Trusty have played as a left back in the past. So I think there is a bit of flexibility. Daisen Maeda for the Japanese international team has played a sort of a wing back on the role on the left-hand side. James Forrest in the past has played as a sort of right-sided wing back. So I think there is quite a lot of flexibility within Celtic's team. Unfortunately, Brendan Rodgers sold Mitchell Frame, who I thought was a very talented young potential left-back player for Celtic, but Rodgers sold him to Aberdeen. I'd forgotten him, but Hayato Inamura, he may not be the best defender, but his ability to pass I thought was very, very impressive. He is a player with a lot of pace, a very good tactical brain as well, very intelligent player. I thought he'd have some very good pre-season games. He played against Livingston. I thought he had a fine game against Livingston. He was certainly able to get into the midfield and even into the final third. Some nice crosses and passes into the box. I think he's a player with a lot of potential. Hasn't got the most high-level experience. He's had 2 half seasons in the J-League before coming to us, but he is 23 years old. He seems to have settled down into Scottish life better than many players. I think Inamura is a player who maybe is a bit like Callum Osmond. I think he was a player that Brendan Rodgers kind of discounted, much like he discounted Shin Yamada. Reportedly, Parrott was at Celtic many years ago. He came for some form of trial, but he chose to go and to play down south rather than coming to Celtic. If there was a prospect of getting him to come to Celtic, I'd be very much for that. He scored a hat trick for Ireland during the week. He's a player with a lot of very big plaudits. He's been successful. There's been vague talk about trying to get Evan Ferguson to come to Celtic in the new year. Find that a bit hard to believe. There's been a lot of speculation that Celtic are looking to get Raheem Sterling to come and play for them in the second half of this season rather. Again, quite where Celtic would find the money for his £325,000 a week salary, I don't know. Whether Chelsea would pay the great majority or all of that, I don't know. But I think some of these rumours are a wee bit pie in the sky. Although I do think if and when Celtic do get their new manager in, I think they are going to be ambitious in the winter transfer window. Otherwise, there's not much point in bringing in a brand new manager. So I would be very surprised if Parrott chose to come to Celtic, but you never know. I think in Johnny Kenny we've got a good, young, promising player. Someone was talking a wee bit earlier about Kelechi Iheanacho. I think Kelechi Iheanacho was very much someone that Brendan Rodgers liked an awful lot. It was quite disappointing that Iheanacho came in at the very last, or actually came in after the last minute in the summer transfer window, and he jumped ahead of all the pre-existing players at Celtic to be the number one choice. I could certainly see Iheanacho being a good person to be bringing off the bench on a regular basis. I think that's possibly could be his role in the future, being like an Adam Idris style person, mostly on the bench, being brought on to be a second striker, brought on to replace the original striker, etc., and starting games from time to time. So more of a backup role. Whether Iheanacho will be keen to play a backup role, I don't know, but I think Celtic should be looking to get in this winter transfer window a new main number one centre forward, and then backing that up with people like Kenny and Osmond and Yamada, with maybe Iheanacho being an impact sub coming off the bench from time to time. Yes, Pat McLaughlin. I think Iheanacho certainly had good times at Man City, some good times at Leicester. He was successful at Leicester. He was more Jamie Vardy's backup at Leicester. He didn't tend to be the number one striker. He quite often played as a second striker alongside Jamie Vardy for some of the time with Brendan Rodgers. Then obviously didn't have any success moving to Spanish football. Had no real success when he played for Middlesbrough on loan. And to be fair to him, when he came in to play for Celtic in sort of September time, he was relatively successful. However, he did miss rather a lot of chances. He did look like he was always just a step or two too slow for playing in Celtic's team as a first choice. I suspect that had he had another few weeks of playing on a regular basis, that he might well have got himself back up to speed. Unfortunately, he got himself injured with his hamstring, and I think he's probably going to be back to square one. But he's not yet 30, so he's younger than Kyogo was in Kyogo's last year at Celtic. So I think there is a role for Iheanacho at Celtic. as the sort of backup. Whether he wants to play that role, I don't know. He's only under contract for Celtic until the end of this season, so I wouldn't be too surprised if he doesn't move on next May, June time. So one of the other things I thought would be fun to talk about this evening in the live stream was what people feel are our number 1, 2, and 3 priority positions for the January transfer window. Now that might be slightly skewed by who ends up being Celtic's permanent manager. I think Celtic should certainly hope to have a brand new manager in, as I said, in time for him to actually have a proper go at the winter transfer window to shape the squad and improve the squad. I think right wing is definitely a position that we need to look at. We should hopefully be getting Jota back sometime in 2026. Jota can play right side, left side. I suspect probably that Dyson Maeda will be moving on during the winter transfer window, although, again, there are stories back in the press that he might well be staying at Celtic to the end of the season. That might also be influenced by who comes in to replace Brendan Rodgers in the next few weeks or whenever that might be. Centre forward, definitely. I think Celtic do need a proven, regular, reliable goal scorer, much like Georgios Giakoumakis, much like Kyogo Furuhashi, a player who can score 20, 30 goals every season. Ideally, a player like Lee Griffiths, who scored 40 goals in a season. I think anything more than that is probably being over-ambitious, but I think certainly we do need a proven leader striker who plays most of the games as the number 1 choice and plays all the biggest games as the number 1 choice, much like how Kyogo was, particularly in his best season, which was the second season under Ange Postecoglou. And I've been advocating for Celtic to get a defensive midfielder for a long time. And particularly if Celtic, I think even with the way that Celtic play at the moment, with their sort of 4-3-3 or 4-2-1-2-1, that O'Neill sort of plays to an extent, I think we do need central defenders who can step forward out of defence and pass into the midfield or get the ball out wide. Austin Trusty is a good passer. Liam Scales is getting a bit better as a passer. But I really would like a sort of hybrid central defender, defensive midfielder. We kind of had that in the past with Nir Bitton. He was a defensive midfielder who could play centre back. I think that's quite a useful position. Briefly, we had that with Tomoki Iwata. He was more of a defensive midfielder who also played a bit of centre back. And certainly one of the central parts of the Nancy 3-4-3 or the 3-4-2-1 is having the central centre back being someone who can step forward into midfield. So Pat McLaughlin, I would certainly a good quality right winger, a good quality centre forward, and a good centre back stroke defensive midfielder. Particularly if that defensive midfielder has a bit of aggression and bite and etc. About him. So Well, I think yes. So I'm certainly hoping that. But the thing about Honda Civics is that there are several different versions of the Honda Civic. There's a more sporty version of the Honda Civic that's top speed is 130 miles an hour. The Honda Civic does actually come with various different sizes of engine, various different horsepowers, etc. I'm not a car fanatic, but the whole point about the Honda Civic was that there are a lot of different versions of it, and a really good, top quality, sporty Honda Civic is more than enough for anybody. Yes, so the you make a brilliant point, and the Doctor Strangelove. Inamura potentially could be that person. When he was playing in Japanese football, although he was playing more left-sided centre back, he was somebody who, in that team, stepped forward into midfield on a really, really regular basis. He had really good anticipation and pace for covering back behind himself. So Inamura could be a player that we could use in that position. I think Austin Trusty possibly has the ability with passing and a bit of practice to be that role as well. Dane Murray's defending maybe isn't quite as good as it could be. Another player that I think would be fitted for that central defensive midfielder centre-back role would be someone like Alistair Johnston. He's played that sort of role on occasion for the Canadian national team. Johnson is a good defender. He's 5'11", so he can step back into defending, but he is able to come forward into midfield and further, and is a good passer. So I think Celtic actually do have quite a lot of different players. Although I do think if we are going to go with Wilfried Nancy, he probably would be looking for someone specifically to play that role and bring in. But within the club, I think Trusty, Inamura, Johnson all could play that role with a wee bit of practice. I fully get your point, Clashman Numpty. I think the benefit of having players who, a bit like Dyson Maida, a bit like, say, there's Diego Rossi, the chap who plays for Columbus Crew, is that the flexibility a player like that brings to a club, in that he can play 2 or 3 positions with a lot of ability, does give the manager, the head coach, quite a lot of flexibility if he is going to change tactics and formations from week to week. And as I say, at Columbus Crew, Rossi plays typically either as an attacking midfielder, second striker, or the main striker. And I think that just gives the manager a lot more options. But I fully get your point that ideally I would like our wide players to be able to play right side and left side. Now, Chineki, Balakwisha, Jota, Maeda, Forrest, Yang all can play both sides. A lot of them prefer to play left side rather than right side. But I think Jota would be equally effective up and down the right-hand side as he would be the left-hand side. Personally, I think Dyson might have been naturally right-footed doesn't actually have the best left foot. He might be best down the right-hand side rather than on the left side. Chineki is naturally two-footed, so he might be the better one to keep on the left-hand side. But I'd like our wide players to be much more flexible. What I also really quite like is our wide players to swap from side to side to side, which I think unsettles the other team's defenders. I think the extra pace of a player like Dyson Maeda, for as long as we have him, is going to be very useful. Yep. And I think, as you're saying here, Paul Boy 67, I think getting Jota back, assuming that he comes back fit and healthy and at the same kind of level as he was just getting to when unfortunately got injured against, and it was Dundee United towards the end of last season. I think it took him a bit of time to get back into playing football on a regular basis. However, a lot of the magic of Jota was starting to come back. He actually scored a reasonable number of goals. I think he was just getting used to playing in the Brendan Rodgers system at the end of last season, when unfortunately he got himself an injury that was going to keep him out 9-12 months. My personal, I think I would agree with that, Sligo boy. I think James Forrest is at his best coming off the bench for half an hour or so. He, for one reason or another, seemed to be revitalised under the O'Neill-Maloney partnership. He looked for me a bit slow, not really confident to take on players. It seemed as soon as O'Neill and Maloney came in, suddenly James Forrest was happy to take people on, try and beat them on the inside, on the outside. So it's sometimes with players, it's difficult to know whether it's they've lost the ability to do things, or whether they're being coached and told by their manager or their coaches not to do certain things. Balikwisha is another example. Balikwisha was playing for Royal Antwerp, and early in his career in Belgian football, he was a player who would take people on for pace on the outside, dribbling on the inside. He's able to use his right foot, his left foot. He's not got tons and tons of pace, but he was more than decent pace. However, under Brendan Rodgers, he certainly didn't seem confident to take on anybody, whether it was a matter of not quite being 100% fit. He had missed a few games early in the season for Royal Antwerp. Then he was kind of kept out for a wee bit of time. You could well be right. Again, Rio Tati, of course, was injured at the end of last season. He's not looked himself at all this season. I think he, much like Dyson Maida, had kind of prepared himself for a move in the summer. That kind of all fell apart. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see both him and Dyson Maida and maybe Yang all disappear in the winter transfer window. My personal feeling is, if that's going to be the case, that Hatate is moving on in the winter, that Celtic for the next 6 weeks or so should look to play McCowan, Paul Bernardo, but particularly Arnie Engels. After all, he is our most expensive player of all time. So I think Celtic should invest fully in getting Arnie Engels into Celtic's team on a very regular basis. We committed £4 million to buy Paolo Bernardo 15 months ago. Again, I think he's not really had much of a role under Brendan Rodgers when he was still the manager. He's not really played very much under the Maloney O'Neill team. And again, having invested £4 million in him, he's probably again a player that should be playing more and more, particularly if Hatate is moving on. Yes, I don't think James Forrest, you're quite right, Sligo, but I don't think James Forrest is capable of playing 90 minutes at all for Celtic anymore. I think giving him 20, 30 minutes at the end of the game is probably going to be his limit. There is the argument you could play him for the first 45 minutes, 60 minutes, then take him off and replace him with somebody else. I think he's best, particularly if he's going to show the ability to beat a player on the inside and the outside. I think he is a player maybe to bring on for the last 20, 30 minutes of a game when maybe other teams are starting to tire a bit. He would fit into the 3-4-2-1 formation. He is a player actually who could technically play as a right wing back, particularly if it's only for a short period of time, although I do think Johnston, Ralston and Donovan are all quite well set up to play that role if we go with that. And obviously Sirachi, when he gets fit, probably towards the end of this year, and Tierney. I think they can certainly play that system. Yes, I think with I think if I think Liam Scales is a good, dependable player. I think he ideally needs a wee bit more pace when defending. He's not got the best recovery pace, which is why the extra pace of Trusty and Scales or Sirachi and Tierney covering back behind him is useful. I think Scales, if he worked on his passing, could be a very, very useful player for Celtic. I think he's the kind of player that that probably would remain loyal to Celtic. I think he's not likely to be the sort of player who would want to leave Celtic necessarily. I don't see Wilfried Nancy coming in tomorrow, but unless there's suddenly been a news story that's come to light in the last hour and a half since we started the live stream, I think probably if Nancy is coming, it's probably going to be the following week, or a lot of rumours are suggesting it's going to be around about the time of the Hibs match, which is a week on Sunday. Yes, the AGM is going to be feisty. I don't think that the AGM is going to move anything forward, but we never know. What I really would love to hear at the AGM tomorrow would be that the Nicholsons and the Mackays and so on are going to be much more visible, much more open to questioning, press conferences, appearances on Celtic TV, etc. Much more like how things are in many other clubs and many other sports, particularly in American sport. People like Nicholson, so the general manager of football clubs and American football teams and stuff, are much more visible, much more vocal, much more put up for questioning in press conferences and stuff. And I think Celtic should be looking to have either Nicholson appearing on a regular basis or someone speaking on behalf of Nicholson, the executives and the board. And I think that would be a great thing for Celtic to put forward at tomorrow's AGM. Whether they do, they don't, I don't know. I would probably think not much is going to happen, but probably there's going to be a lot of fighting, a lot of controversy, and hopefully constructive things come out of it. Yes, I think Sluggo Boy, I agree that Scales is good at doing what he's good at doing. I would love to see him being a bit better I'd like to see him being a lot better as a passer. He has looked a wee bit more confident again, a bit less dithery with his passing since O'Neill and Maloney came in. Whether that's just O'Neill and Maloney talking to the players in training and in the dressing room and at player meetings and stuff to be much more incisive, quicker moving, etc. It felt like under Rodgers, Scales always wanted to take a second and a third touch before he made his pass. There's going to be times with all players where they're going to rush a pass, but the quicker you do everything, the easier it is to play quickly. And certainly lots and lots of players were able to speed up under Ange Postecoglou's system and pass more quickly, do their throw-ins, their corner kicks, their bye kicks, their free kicks, etc. with a lot more pace. Yes, I think Scales is a player who has he's still, I think he's sort of mid-20s, so he's a player who can still certainly got several years of improvement in him. And I think if he was working with somebody, working on his passing, working on his decision-making, I think he could actually be a really good player, a really even better player for Celtic. Plus, as I say, he does give us a bit of flexibility. He played some of the time as a left back, as a left centre back. He seemed to be lining up for Ireland through the week as a sort of a left-sided midfielder. He played that role a bit for Aberdeen when he was up there on loan. I think he's a player that could actually be a real bonus for Celtic in the long run with a bit of work. Oh dear. Yes. Yes, McManus was another player who's maybe had a not such a great reputation. I think he was a dependable player. He was a player loyal to Celtic. Yes, that is very much also something I think Celtic should look to do in the very near future, is to get someone in to be the new Callum McGregor. He's 32, 33 or something along that age group. I think he's not so good this season as he was last season. Now that might be simply that because Celtic were playing a bit slower under Brendan Rodgers and seem to be getting slower and slower through the season under Brendan Rodgers. Maybe if he's playing a bit faster under O'Neill and whoever the new manager is, maybe he has a bit of a rebirth. I don't know. But very much, I think we should be looking to replacing McGregor. Either we replace him internally. I think Arnie Engels could play that role. I think Paulo Bernardo could play that role. Potentially, maybe Watson could play that role, the guy from Kilmarnock. Lennon Miller. Now, there's been vague talk about Lennon Miller, who's currently playing, obviously, for Udinese, or not playing very much for Udinese, coming back to Celtic in the January transfer window. Again, I don't think that's really likely to happen, but maybe Udinese loan Miller back to Celtic for the second part of the 25-26 season. That would be interesting to see. I think Lennon Miller could be that sort of player in the long run to replace Callum McGregor. As I said, Engels potentially, Paulo Bernardo potentially could play that role. A lot of people have suggested Luke McCowan. I don't really see Luke McCowan as being that Callum McGregor style of player, but maybe with coaching and practice and stuff. So Watson certainly is a very promising player. I think he was the Young Player of the Year last year in Scotland. He's had 2 or 3 seasons playing pretty much every game for Kilmarnock, so he's quite similar to the level of experience that Lennon Miller had. Watson's contract is up in May 2026, so I think there's a very high chance that Kilmarnock will be looking to sell him in the winter transfer window. There are stories that Aberdeen want him. There are stories that Hearts want him. There are stories that Rangers want him. There have been rumours that Celtic wants him. I think Watson is a player who's got better and better. He's the current Scotland under-21 captain, which I think is also quite an important thing. Leading a team, leading a group of men. He's obviously the most experienced player in that under-21 side for Scotland. He's done a pretty good job as their captain. So I think there's a lot of plus points and bonuses with Watson. And I think he's a player who maybe a year or two understudying Callum McGregor, and he could very much be a long-term player for Celtic. That's much kind of what I thought about Lennon Miller as well, although he's chosen at the moment to go off to Italy. Yes. So again, I thought McManus was a pretty decent player for Celtic. Good and dependable, loyal to the club. Was probably a wee bit better as a player than many people gave him credit for. I personally liked him better than Gary Caldwell. I think Gary Caldwell had a more of a positive reputation. Yes, I didn't personally see the Scotland under 21 games this international break. Saw the reports and stuff, and certainly the stories were that Watson had led the team very well. And Celtic do have a few players away currently on loan playing for Scottish Championship clubs, Ayr and Partick Thistle and so on. And they're popping back and forward between their Championship clubs and coming back to Celtic for training, which I think is a good thing as well. So sometimes they're training with their team and sometimes they're training with Celtic, and it's a really good thing. And I think Ewan, again, is a player with lots and lots of potential. I think he's probably a player who could really do with a year or two playing regular first-team football, and then would have the potential to come into Celtic's team, be a backup, and then in a year or two after that be a number one choice. Yep. So it was, you're quite right. Noah Patsy 10. I was actually quite surprised. I was watching the first of the Celtic videos, and it seemed to be mostly about Kieran Tierney coming back to Lennoxtown and everybody congratulating him for scoring the goal that put Scotland into the World Cup. And then in the more extended 7-minute video, Donovan was there, Tuneki was there, most of the players were there, and certainly when Donovan got stretchered off in the first under-21 game, it looked really, really bad. I think his initial scan wasn't good, and then clearly the injury wasn't nearly as bad as was thought, because he was back taking a full part in today's training. So I would guess that both he and Ralston are going to be 100% fit for the game against St Mirren at the weekend. My personal feeling is Donovan's probably the better bet in the long run. He's obviously a lot younger than Ralston. Ralston's, I think, 27, 28. Donovan's, 19, 20. So I think Donovan's got a bit more height and strength and power about him. He's probably that wee bit better in the final third than Ralston. Don't think he's anywhere near as good as Alistair Johnston doing that role, but I think he's a player who's going to get better and better for us. And again, I think if Celtic get him signed for a 5-year contract, if we do it, the sooner the better. That'll give Celtic a good, strong 2-people option or 3-people option at the right back position, particularly if we do go with the Wilfried Nancy way of playing. Having extra players to play those attacking fullback roles is very important, particularly if that attacking fullback's got the pace to get back and defend as well. Yes, Effie Ambrose certainly always struck me as being rather error prone and accident prone. I thought Dedrick Boyata was actually a pretty good player. His career really hasn't taken off after he left Celtic to go back down south, and then he went off I think to play in Belgium. I thought Dedrick Boyata was actually a pretty decent player. Effie Ambrose, hard worker, tried his hardest, but he was, to me, always error prone, got himself caught out. Yeah, so I liked Dedrick Boyata as a player, but he didn't really see his career as being at Celtic, and moved away from us, unfortunately. But I think he was a player that would have been a good player for Celtic, but he chose not to stay. Yeah, I think Ambrose was a player. Obviously, you're quite right. The higher and higher level of football, I think the more and more he struggled, and I think that's also the case with quite a number of players at Celtic or players at any club moving up to that next level. It's really where having that extra bit of quality or extra bit of skill and talent really tells. I think we've got a lot of. I think our current squad is the best squad in Scotland, but I think we do need a few more real quality players to really take things forward in terms of Europe. And I think in terms of success in Europe, it's probably going to take 2 or 3 good transfer windows to really get the level of quality and the level of depth into the team. I think had Ange Postecoglou stuck with the club, we probably in his 3rd and 4th seasons would have moved on and on and on. As I say, I think things got a bit reversed. Going back to Brendan Rodgers, I think some of the players who were brought in by the Ange Postecoglou scouting side team didn't really fit into the way that Brendan Rodgers liked his players to play. I think that kind of put Celtic back a bit. I think some players like Lagerbielke, Nawrocki, Palma, etc., Tilio to a lesser extent, were maybe more suited to the Ange Postecoglou style of things. I don't think it was really suited to the way that Rodgers liked, particularly his centre backs and his wide players to play. The computer system that does all these analysis things is suggesting that 10 points should get you into the top section so get you into the knockout section. I think last season Rangers got 8th place and seeded through to the last 16, having got 14 points. I think the teams who got 10, 11, 12, 13 were the ones who were in the first knockout round, and I think Rangers were the 8th place in last year's Europa League with 14 points, and that got them the 8th seed place and straight into the last 16. So I think about 10 points is thought to be the required level, and obviously at the moment we've got 4 points, so we're going to need some good results in the last few games. We're halfway through. We've got 4 points, so we're not quite halfway to the points that we require. We do have a game against Utrecht at home towards the end. Feyenoord, their Europa League hasn't gone that well so far this season either. Roma's hasn't gone that well either. I think Roma's position in the table is a wee bit false because they had the good luck to play Rangers in their last game. That's moved them out of the bottom section into the middle section. I think there are points that Celtic can certainly pick up in the last 4 games, enough to get them to the 10-point level, which should get them into the first set of knockout rounds. And of course, a couple of the games, the last couple of games in the Europa League are in January. We are going to have to obviously go through quite a intense spell in Christmas and New Year. There's also going to be the African Cup of Nations, which at the moment is going to take definitely Czechia away and probably take Balikwisha away. He made his debut for the Democratic Republic of Congo in the international break that's just finished. Apparently came on in the second match against Nigeria, played well as a sub, and then scored the vital penalty that put the Democratic Republic of Congo through to the knockout round, the playoff knockout round that follows on for them. So he made a promising debut for the country of his parents rather than the country that he had represented as a younger player. My personal feeling is that that given time to settle down and given time to settle into a particular role at Celtic, that Balikwisha will turn out to be a good player. He might well actually turn out to be a good player particularly under the system. If Wilfried Nancy did come in to be the Celtic new manager, I think he actually would fit in fine with the two attacking midfielder role, where the attacking midfielders can spread out wide or be more central. I think Balikwisha might well fit into that role really well. There's a wee bit of speculation that Luis Palma, who's playing in that attacking midfield role for Lech Poznan whilst he's on loan with them, he also might be a player that would fit into the Wilfried Nancy system quite well as one of those central attacking midfielders who can spread out wide. So it is going to be interesting. Whoever gets the job in the next few weeks, just how he sees Celtic's squad, how he sees what he needs to add in January and what he needs to add in the summer. Obviously, with quite a number of Celtic's squad going to be off in Canada, Mexico, and America in the World Cup, there's going to be really quite a short post-season break for them, holiday for them, and with the way if Celtic did, as I expect them to do, win the Scottish Premiership this season, I think we'll be in the fairly early qualifying rounds for the Champions League next summer, which is also going to be a bit of a problem if so a lot of our players are going to be away playing the World Cup in America, Canada, and Mexico. I think they're going to have a relatively short break and then straight into pre-season and then very, very early into Champions League qualifiers, assuming that we do actually win the league as expected. I can't particularly. I can't actually really remember that game particularly well. Against Man City, obviously we did pretty well against them. Thought last season when we played Aston Villa, we obviously got off to a really terrible start. Then we got ourselves back into the game. I think the result in the end was a wee bit unfair on Celtic. It was a bit of a dodgy penalty that gave them the lead, and then obviously a late goal that added the second. Hey to you as well. Nice to have you on. Football is Life 1595. The story is that they've sold. They've dropped their shareholding from something like 12% to 11%. There's probably in essence they are the Lidsdale Train Group are basically sort of an investment banking finance company that has significant shares in quite a number of different clubs. They've got a similar share apparently in the Juventus. So I honestly don't know if there is any significance in them selling off a certain number of shares. So I don't know whether there's any significance in it at all. Celtic's share price appears to be staying nice and steady. It's not going up, it's not going down. It's still a club that lots and lots of people are investing in. Clearly, with Lidsell Train selling 1% of their share offering, those shares were bought by somebody else. Whether that's what I read as well, that they're the third biggest shareholder in Juventus. So obviously, that's a very big undertaking as well. I haven't got the foggiest idea, and I'm not sure if there's any way of finding out who bought those shares. I think the indication from what I read was all the shares were bought by one particular group or bank or hedge fund or investor, etc. I.e., that million shares or 500 shares, whatever, 500,000 shares were bought by one particular group or person. As I said, the Lidsell Train Group, what they do is they invest in lots of different very profitable companies, and they work out when to sell, when to buy, etc. Their raison d'etre, what they do is they make money for themselves and for their company, etc. And so they buy shares when it's the right thing to do, and they sell shares when it's the right thing to do. They move from one thing to the other. I don't think there's any great significance in them selling, but you never know. So maybe they sold all their shares to Dermot Desmond. Maybe they sold all their shares to Peter Lawwell. Maybe they've sold all their shares to Rod Stewart. I don't know. Whatever the case is, that with Dermot Desmond having the best part of 35% of the shares in the club, as long as he's got one or two other people who are part of his group, he's going to always have 50% or more to vote anything down in terms of board decisions, etc. So personally, I don't see there being any. I don't think there's any significance in them. If what would be significant would be if they sold all their 11% shareholding in Celtic. Now that would be significantly significant. Selling 1% here and there, especially because the Celtic share price has, despite all the kerfuffle and problems off the pitch and all the disruption within the club, etc. Celtic share price has stayed very steady. All the high-level financial people, the American banks, etc., have stayed invested in the club. So I don't think there's any significance, but I'm not an expert on all these things. I have interest in Celtic's managers, their players, their tactics, their future. I don't have any real interest in the AGM. I don't really have any interest in the shenanigans of selling shares back and forward. The only reason I know that Celtic's share price has stayed steady is that on my my computer screen thing, the news section, it's one of the shares that it always talks about. Yes, so it certainly has been a great week for Scotland. It's been a good week for Ireland, obviously. They had a slightly surprising win over Portugal. Then they had a great win against Hungary, so they're into the playoffs. It was good for Northern Ireland. They're into the playoffs. It was good for Wales. They won, I think, 7-1 against Macedonia. So they're all in the playoffs. It's actually really rather good that all five of, well, I know Ireland aren't technically a home nation, but all the five countries in Great Britain, United Kingdom, Northern Ireland, except and Republic of Ireland, are all in either straight into the World Cup like Scotland and England, or at least have a good chance. I think both Wales and Ireland have a good chance of getting through the playoffs. I think the fact that Ireland and Wales have both got home games in both legs, I think that's very much to their benefit. I think Ireland could certainly beat Denmark, assuming that Denmark win their semi-final. I think Wales, I think they're in the section with Italy. That might well be more of a struggle, but certainly playing the second game, the final game at home in Wales, gives them every chance of getting through to the World Cup. And it's nearly 27 years since Scotland were last at a World Cup in France '98, obviously it was very good for Celtic in that it was a Celtic player that scored the vital goal just at the start of added time that's put Scotland through to their first World Cup for 28 years. So well done to Celtic. Well done to Kieran Tierney, because it had been 2 years or so since a Celtic player had last scored a goal for Scotland. Callum McGregor scored the last Celtic player goal for Scotland. That was back in the summer of 2023 against Georgia. So it was a good 2.5 years pretty much since a Celtic player had scored for Scotland. So all in all, as David O'Connor is saying, it was a good week for Scotland internationally, and it's been a good week for all five of the teams. If we're talking about rugby, the five teams that make up the British Lions. There's certainly the Kenny McLean goal from halfway was a good way to end the game. Certainly the referees seemed desperate to add as much time as they could. It was supposed to be 5 minutes, which then went to 6 minutes, which then went to 7 minutes, and I think it was about 8.5 minutes when Kenny McLean actually scored that fourth goal that definitely put us through. I don't think personally that that Kasper Schmeichel will be coming so far out of his goal as he did on Tuesday evening. as I said, one or two people were blaming him for being so far up the pitch. I think he was told to come up that far up the pitch. It is interesting that Kieran Tierney, in his interview that was on YouTube, was saying that Kasper Schmeichel had been given an extra day off. I'm not quite sure why that was. He's not back in training till tomorrow. Whether there is an intention to give Sinisalo the start on Saturday against St Mirren, don't know. Certainly, he and Ross Doohan were both there in training today. Kasper Schmeichel apparently is not back until tomorrow. Dyson Maid is not back until tomorrow. Austin Trusty is not back until tomorrow, or tomorrow being Friday, because we're nearly actually into Friday already. Yes. Yes, so I think obviously the McTominay goal was spectacular. I think for quality and for how calm Kieran Tierney was when he stepped up to take that shot, he couldn't have actually hit that shot any better. It was with good power, but not too much power. It curved just perfectly round the defenders, round Kasper Schmeichel, then curled back in just inside the post. It was a truly spectacular goal. The fact that it was a minute or so into added time was pretty remarkable. And as I say, the fact that he kept so calm, stepping up to take that shot, that was possibly the most remarkable thing. Because it was going to be a good opportunity for Scotland. Denmark, despite the fact that we're down to 10 men, were defending really pretty well. Just apart from obviously the 4 shots they beat Kasper Schmeichel, he didn't really have terribly many other real saves to make in the whole match. Made a couple of saves, but nothing that difficult. I think what you're saying, Clashman, is a bit of a two-edged sword. I think part of the reason that Scotland got through this qualifying campaign was due to the fact that Clark stayed loyal to so many of the players, that those players had very much sort of merged into a very good team unit. I think he stayed loyal to quite a lot of players who were not first choice players for their teams. Obviously, in terms of Scotland's goalkeepers, Scotland doesn't have a single goalkeeper at the moment who's a first choice goalkeeper. People like Kenny McLean aren't playing week in, week out. Lyndon Dykes doesn't play week in, week out. The other thing is that Scotland's, well, if you look at Scotland, we've got a weakness, certainly. Scotland's got a real weakness for me in central defence, but I'm not sure. I thought McKenna actually was a bit of an upgrade in central defence. I've not got a lot of faith in Hanley or in Suter, but I'm not sure there's any better young centre backs who are Scottish to take their places. If other people can think of good examples, all well and good. I think in terms of our midfielders, Ferguson, Gilmour, McTominay, McGinn, all four players that are, I think, and Christie for that matter. I think there's an argument to say that if they could convince Callum McGregor to come out of retirement, he might be a useful player to put into the midfield. I certainly think that taking a player or two like Lennon Miller is a good idea for coming off the bench, but also for continuity in the future. Hopefully we can get Ben Gannon Doak completely fully fit, because when he's fit, he is a real bonus to Scotland. I don't, I'm not convinced that there's terribly much better for Scotland than in terms of strikers than what we've got. So I think part of the problem that Scotland's got is there's not an awful lot of good young players to come in and replace the players like Dykes and Shankland and Che Adams. I think they're all dependable players. Yeah. I personally think that So I think Ryan Christie is actually a pretty good player for Scotland. He's actually scored over the last couple of years. He's actually scored a lot of goals for Scotland in international football. I think he has a role to play in midfield. He's a role to play as a more attacking midfielder. He has actually dropped back deeper for Bournemouth this season. Bournemouth obviously flying very high up in the English Premier League at the moment. So I think Christie's a good player for Scotland. Fully accept that Gordon at 42, 43, his best days are long gone. Bain is the only first choice goalkeeper that we've got, in that Kelly and Gunn and everybody else are backups. I don't think that we've got very much quality in central defence. We're not like England or Portugal or Italy or France or Germany, who's got tons and tons and tons of players that they can bring in. Yes, Hurst again is, but I'm not sure if there's another. If there's, yes, I think yes, I think we got some luck. However, we did go to Denmark and drew 0-0 with them in Denmark. I think that was probably the biggest result. We beat Greece at home. We beat Belarus home and away. We had a disappointing game against Greece over in Greece. Belarus did us a favour by drawing with Denmark. So we did have a bit of luck, but then in previous qualifying campaigns for the World Cup, we've had a bit of bad luck here and there, some dodgy decisions. And I think personally that the fact that Clark didn't change the squad terribly much, didn't change the team terribly much throughout the whole campaign, allowed them to have continuity. One of the other things that one of the pundits, be it McCann or McFadden or Stephen O'Donnell, was saying that Scotland actually has a very low number of players who call off from international call-ups, that plenty of players have I think so. My personal feeling, and then obviously I've got a degree of bias because I'm Scottish, is that I think we've had some bad luck in terms of previous qualifying campaigns, some dodgy decisions, some bad luck. We've also been stuck in some rather strong groups with teams like France and Italy as the number 1 and number 2 seeds. I think the draw was pretty good for us. I think Greece and Scotland were probably about equal strength. Denmark were maybe half a step ahead of us in terms of quality. I think over the whole course of the beating Denmark 4-2 on Tuesday, probably Denmark were the better team. However, I think our players played for each other. They played for their country. They played for their badge. And in the end, they all came through. I think Pat McLaughlin, I fully agree with you. I think 48 teams is far too many. The first World Cup I can remember was in 1974 in West Germany, when there was just 16 teams. At that point, there wasn't much quality in terms of African football and Asian football. It was almost exclusively South American teams and European teams that had all the quality. So there is a strong argument to say that when they did expand the World Cup, it then allowed Asia and Africa to get better and better and better. I think 48 is probably too many. I think somewhere between those numbers is the best. It would be a far better thing. Looking at the teams who are in the playoffs to get into the World Cup, the last six places left in the World Cup. There are some countries who are rather small countries who have the chance to go to the World Cup, and it's questionable whether that's a good thing. I think personally, 48 is too many teams for a World Cup. So probably something like 32 is a better number than 48. I think 48 is too many. Yes, and I think yes. So I fully agree with that as well. That and so Denmark did draw with Belarus, and we very much took advantage of the fact that Belarus had helped us out. And sometimes it is a question of when you do get a bit of luck, or things fall your way, fall into place for you, and you take the opportunity. So despite the fact we lost to Greece, Belarus did us a favour by taking a point off of Denmark. And Clashman Numpty, I do actually have some worries about the World Cup being in America, with the way the political situation is in America, with a lot of different things. So if anybody who's in the audience is going to be going to support Scotland or Ireland or whomever at the World Cup, just be very careful with your social media profile, because the customs people and the visa people in America at the moment are very, very harsh with things. So all I would say is, if anybody is going to be going to America, just to be careful with your social media profile, and do be careful with all your visas and stuff are all completely watertight as well. Yes, it would be good actually. It would be good if Scotland were drawn into one of the groups that was primarily in Canada or primarily in Mexico. I think Canada probably actually would be a much better bet for us in terms of the nature of the country, the landscape, the weather, etc. Mexico, obviously, super hot country. America in that time of year, in the summer, is also going to be incredibly hot. Pretty much wherever you are in America that time of year is very, very hot. Canada, obviously, being that bit further north, much more a similar climate to a Scottish summertime than America and Mexico is. As I said, I can only apologise I can only apologise for accidentally freezing you out. It was unintentional. But however, I did think personally, it got to the point where it was important to lay down the rules and say that we did not all need to be playing by the rules, so that everyone can have fun. And the last hour and a half or so has been, for me, the kind of fun that these sort of live streams should be. Lots of people having their opinions. We're talking about lots and lots of football related types of things, and that's why I decided I would, despite the fact that the channel is a very small channel, not a very popular channel in terms of the subscriber numbers that all the other Celtic channels have got. I thought it'd be fun to have a live stream, particularly for the fact that a lot of the other live streams, it seems to be the mates of the person who runs the channel that gets to be the one who gets all the comments that are put up. I do try as best I can to get everybody up. Yes, that I actually do have a good sense of humour, everybody, but I do often take things a bit too seriously as well, which is also can be a fault. So I sometimes do take things a bit too literal. But it's actually quite difficult reading all the comments and thinking and talking at the same time and trying to make vaguely some form of sense. So in terms of just looking forward a wee bit to Celtic's future, obviously our next game is against St Mirren on Saturday evening, an 8 o'clock kickoff, which I think is a pretty rotten time for a game on a Saturday. Does anyone have any thoughts about? I think one has to assume it's going to be Martin O'Neill who's going to be leading the team and picking the team and picking the tactics on Saturday. Does anyone have any particular predictions for the starting 11 for the game against St Mirren on sorry, does anyone have sort of prediction for the starting 11 on Saturday? It does feel that O'Neill has slightly tweaked things a wee bit in terms of the setup. He's got Negrin sort of playing more often than not as sort of an attacking midfielder. He certainly is encouraging the fullbacks to get forward. He's playing McGregor and Engel stroke Hattati in a sort of deeper role, more side by side. He certainly seems to have sort of changed things and tweaked things compared to the way that Rodgers was having things. My own personal thoughts for the game against St Mirren on Saturday. Would be, this is kind of predicting what Martin O'Neill's going to do rather than what I would do personally myself, but these were my own thoughts for the game against St Mirren on Saturday rather. Yes, so my personal thought, I personally would go for Sinisalo rather than Schmeichel. Sinisalo didn't have the best international break. He played in a defeat for Finland and then he got put on the bench for the second match. Not sure whether Schmeichel's confidence is a wee bit low, having conceded 4 on Tuesday. I suspect, given the fact he's a very experienced goalkeeper, that he'll be back as normal tomorrow for training and then fully committed for the team on Saturday. So my thought was Schmeichel in goals, Ralston rather than Donovan at right back, partly because Donovan did have that query injury through the week. Trusty, assuming that he's through the jet lag of coming back from the friendly games in America. Scales, who had a brilliant international break, 2 very good games for Ireland there. Kieran Tierney, he looked fit and fresh in training today. He, of course, only played about half an hour or so for Scotland in the 2 games. I think Engels and McGregor. I think Negrin will play in sort of more attacking midfield. Maeda out on the right. Chuniecki, who looked fully fit in training this morning, on the left, and Kenny through the middle. My personal feeling would be that we should go with something along those lines. The only other real option, I suppose, would be playing somebody else on the right-hand side instead of Maeda and putting Maeda through the middle rather than Kenny. But Kenny made his international debut for Ireland through the international break. We are a wee bit, other than Maid on the right, we might be looking at someone like Balikwisha on the right, or Forrest on the right, or Yang on the right. And I think probably our best option is starting Maid on the right and then maybe moving him through the middle, especially because we don't actually have anybody fit as a striker other than Yamada to be on the bench, because Osman's out, obviously, and Iheanacho was out. So we are a wee bit restricted in terms of experienced strikers. And assuming that everyone is fully fit and fully recovered from the international break, I think probably O'Neill would probably go with something along those lines. There is an argument to say maybe starting Donovan at right back. There's an argument, as much as Clashman Numpty might not like it, Hattati rather than Engels. But I do quite like Benjamin Nygren as that sort of floating attacking midfielder role. He actually played up front as one of two strikers for Sweden in their first game in the international break, and scored a goal as well, playing as an actual out-and-out second striker. So I think, as I said, Balikwisha did actually have a good substitute appearance for Democratic Republic of Congo. Apparently came on late in the game, played through extra time, and then scored the vital penalty kick that put them through to the playoff. I think in time Balikwisha will settle down and be a good player for Celtic, but I'm not sure that he really fits properly into the system that Celtic's got at the moment. In that the pace he had when he was a wee bit younger seems to have disappeared with those injuries, or whether it's simply, as I said, that when he was brought in under Brendan Rodgers, he was told to play in a certain way, which wasn't really the way that he wanted to play, much like Benjamin Nygren. Much of the time under Brendan Rodgers, he played as a much more standard midfielder, didn't really play in the more floating role that he'd often played in Danish football and Swedish football. When I saw Jamie O'Hara making those comments, I think Jamie O'Hara was a very, very limited footballer, much like his partner on talk radio, Jason Cundy. I think they were two very limited players. I think they had the benefit of playing at big clubs. I don't think either of them are particularly skilled in terms of tactics or punditry. I think what they thrive on is being as controversial and as stupid as possible. If there's somebody who is even more annoying and inflammatory than Chris Boyd, it would be Jamie O'Hara. And to be fair, actually, to the Stockport County fan groups and stuff, they immediately came on and said that Stockport County would have no chance at all in the Scottish Premiership, that Celtic, Rangers, Hearts, Hibs would all thump them week in, week out. Now, the amount of money that Stockport and Cardiff and clubs in the English First Division get through their TV contract is pretty obscene, but the quality at Stockport County is obviously rubbish. They'd never thrive at all in Scottish football. I think they would do well probably in the Scottish Championship, which is obviously level below us. But I don't think they'd have any chance in our league. I don't think they would probably give teams like St Mirren or Motherwell or Livingston, Dundee United, etc. a go. There seemed to be. I haven't actually read John Barnes's comments properly. He was very scoffing about Wilfried Nancy coming in to be Celtic's manager because he hasn't got a name. Well, John Barnes certainly had a name when he was Celtic's manager, but he had absolutely no coaching experience, no managerial experience, and a wee bit similar to Liam Brady, who'd been the manager before. Again, big name, but no real good experience managing a first team football team. So John Barnes was rather scoffing about Wilfried Nancy's quality. He also said that he didn't actually know who Wilfried Nancy was, and it's been a recurring theme of quite a few people who've discounted Wilfried Nancy as being any good, as saying, well, I don't actually know who he is or quite what he's done, but yes. I think there is an argument. I think you're quite right. I think possibly John Barnes, when he came in to manage Celtic, thought that was going to be the case, is that he was more going to be learning with Dalglish as the main manager. I don't think Kenny Dalglish's management style was really, he at his previous clubs, Liverpool and Blackburn, relied on a very, very strong coaching staff. I think he's probably the way that Kenny Dalglish managed is a bit more similar to how Martin O'Neill manages. Martin O'Neill seems to be more of a person who comes in on match day and the day before the matches and talks through tactics and motivation and this, that, and the other. Rodgers was much more of a kind of old-fashioned tracksuit manager who was much more involved on a training pitch, much more involved every single day. Appears that Martin O'Neill more just goes around the training ground, watching players, doing little bits of confidence building, etc., here and there, and leaving things to Fotheringham and McManus and Strachan and Maloney, etc. But I do agree it may be that Barnes thought more that Dalglish was going to be the main manager and he was going to be the assistant, and then over a year or two, that would change round. I think you make a really good point. I think the more money that's this SPFL can get into the game, the better. Obviously, this season they've got the Sky contract, and they've also got the Premier Sports contract for the Scottish Premiership. They've got a contract, obviously, for the lower divisions with BBC and BBC Alba. They've got the contract for the Women's League with BBC Alba and BBC Sport. I think the more and more money that Scottish football leagues can get into the game via TV and other forms of multimedia, the better. Scotland's TV deal is absolutely awful. The amount of money that Scotland gets in terms of its TV deal is something like the 30th biggest in the world for TV contracts. It's kind of on the same level or just above the level that the South African League and the Indian League have in terms of football. Scottish Football League gets less TV money than the American Women's League gets, which I think kind of says an awful lot. The amount of money that the English Championship gets is absolutely astronomical, which is why it's becoming more and more difficult for Celtic to compete for players alongside the Dutch, the Portuguese, the Belgians, and the English Championship. The amount of money those leagues have now got from TV, etc., and from sponsorship and prizes, etc., is way out of our league. I think that's probably going to get bigger and bigger. I think personally that Martin O'Neill as a director of football, or Martin O'Neill as some form of board person on the board, as some kind of liaison between the players, the coaches, the managers, and the fans with the board. I think that might well be a good thing. What one or two people have put forward is the fact that Martin O'Neill now seems to be based in London, that his house and his family and all his connections and so on are down in London rather than in Scotland. And so I suspect that he probably wouldn't want to be a director of football. Some form of club ambassador, or possibly some form of a member non-executive on the board, with some form of overseeing of the playing staff, the recruitment, etc. I think that might well be a very useful thing. Some kind of advisor person to help Nicholson and Mackay and Lawwell and the other people on the board. That might well be things. Also as a person to be an ambassador and attract players to come into the club and paint a very positive light of Celtic. I think all these things are a possibility. Whether Martin O'Neill would want to do that at age 73 is another question. Well, I think the number of teams in Scotland is good, but the quality of the teams in Scotland needs to be moved up and up and up. So I've not got a particular problem with Scotland having 4 leagues. I just think that the quality in the Championship should be much more improved. The quality in the First Division, the Second Division should get much more improved. So I think Clashman Numpty's idea of maximising the TV revenue, maximising the sponsorship, the merchandising, and so on, to raise the standards of the lower leagues is important. I think one can see that with leagues like the Dutch League and the Belgian League and the English Championship. All those leagues had big cash injections, and it's raised the standard of all those teams. In Holland and in Belgium, there are quite a number of teams who challenge for the title year in, year out. That's not really the case in Scotland. After all, we've won the title pretty much every single year, apart from one for the last 15 years. We've won the massive majority of the titles for the last 25 years. So I think personally that I don't have a particular problem with the number of teams in Scotland. I think it's important that smaller communities have a team that they can support. The teams in the Highlands, the Borders, Fife, Central Scotland. I think all those are important. I think also potentially if you raise the quality of the lower divisions, that also helps players come through from the lower divisions and reach the higher divisions. Also allows the bigger clubs to loan out their talented young players to the lower divisions. So I think personally that what we should be looking to do is raising all the teams in Scotland up and up and up, and that comes with investment, which is why I think trying to maximise the TV revenue is very important. So looking at other revenue streams, looking at other things like Netflix and Amazon and so on is a good idea. And I personally think also if Scotland did look to expand their TV revenue and their TV exposure, it probably would also encourage Sky Sports to invest a bit more money in the Scottish leagues as well, and also be more committed to the Scottish leagues, because they don't. I think last season and the season before, they didn't actually take up all their quota of games. And I think partly that's why Premier Sports this season was allowed to get a certain number of league games on their channel, was the fact that they were picking up some of the slacks, picking up some of the slots that Sky Sports had left empty. Oh dear. So, not a big expert on things like Fire Sticks, etc. And we're actually looking to cut down the number of channels we've got rather than expand the channels that we've got. But obviously, at the moment, you do need to have Premier Sports. You do need to have Sky. You need to have BBC, and also the sort of the TNT DAZN network as well for and Discovery Channel combination for the European matches at the moment. Yes, got a wee bit lost there. Yes, certainly. And again, I think all these things are really important. I think Celtic as a football club and Scotland as a league needs to try and move further and further forward, maximise things like IT, maximise, I think, Celtic maximising their IT, Wi-Fi, etc. for fans at the games. I think improving the TV coverage. I think the pricing for Celtic TV is far too high. I think the amount of money they charge for games is far too much. I think 3-1 is a good prediction. I think personally, with the way that Martin O'Neill's likely to set the team up compared to St Mirren, I think Celtic will be on the front foot. I think Celtic will attack. I think part of the difficulty Celtic had when we played St Mirren early in the season, I think we probably were a wee bit undercooked in terms of our pre-season preparation. A few of our players had come in rather late into pre-season, so I don't think they were fully match fit going into the first game against St Mirren. I think we also were a bit cautious in terms of our tactics, our formation, and our way of playing. First couple of the games in the season, I think we were very, very negative in our passing. A tremendous number of backward passes and lateral passes. Didn't really get the ball forward. We didn't really put much service out to Maeda and to up front to Ida as a centre forward. We weren't very attacking in our midfield. We weren't really getting the fullbacks properly far enough forward. But I think all those things won't be the case for the game against St Mirren on Saturday. So I do have one or two wee reservations about the game being an 8 o'clock kickoff. I think it's a funny time for a game on a Saturday. The good news, obviously, is the distance from Glasgow to Paisley isn't too far. Obviously, Celtic also has a large number of fans who travel from Ireland and from far afield. And a game that late on a Saturday is not ideal. Yes, so there are plenty of leagues, unfortunately, around Europe who are making their TV deals better and better and better. The Scottish TV deal has been rather static. As I said, we did actually get a bit of an upgrade with Premier Sports getting their additional league matches on top of their cup matches. So I think personally, I think part of the difficulty also in Scotland is the fact that there isn't probably an awful lot of a market for many of the games unless it's involving Celtic or Rangers, which is pretty much why nearly every game on Sky involves one or the other of Celtic or Rangers. I think in terms of selling the Scottish League and the Scottish Premier League to the rest of the world, there's not much of a market for Dundee against Motherwell or Livingston against Dundee United. There is a market for Celtic and Rangers because both Celtic and Rangers have got a global, widespread audience in pretty much every country in the world. I think part of what Scotland could do is raise the quality of Hibs, Hearts, Aberdeen, Dundee United, make them better and better and better. It's a wee bit of a vicious circle of the lack of money invested in the league from sponsorship and from TV kind of brings down the quality of the players that those teams can attract. So I think that kind of spirals down and down. Does look like Aberdeen, Hibs, and Hearts have had a fair amount of investment from their various different new owners and so on. Rangers obviously had a big cash injection from the San Francisco 49ers group. Celtic obviously has quite a lot of money in their bank. Celtic's wage budget, combination of off the field people and the players on the pitch. Celtic's wage budget actually went up £9 million last season, or last year rather, and that's obviously going to be the case for the next couple of years. Although we no longer will have the £3.5 million that Brendan Rodgers was getting every year. So that'll come off the budget, but certainly Celtic's wage budget has rose really quite a lot last year. Big pay rises for the non-playing staff, but also big pay rises for many of the playing staff as well. Yes, you make a perfect point, and I think unfortunately that the gap between many countries in Europe and the big five leagues is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think it's going to get more and more difficult for anybody outside of France, Germany, Spain, Italy, or England to ever win anything in Europe, because those leagues get stronger and stronger. They get richer and richer. Their TV money goes up, their prize money goes up, their merchandising goes up, their sponsorship goes up. And unfortunately, countries like Scotland and Sweden and Denmark and Finland and the Eastern European teams are all going to go down and down and down. And it's going to get more. I think it's going to get more and more difficult over the years for Celtic and Rangers to compete in Europe and compete for the best players. And so the rumoured Pan-European League might be one solution for Celtic and Rangers and any other teams to pull us up to the same sorts of finance deals that the big European teams have got. certainly that I think you're entirely right. I think one of the slight difficulties that Scottish football had, obviously, is I can't remember what particular year it was, but Scottish League sold itself to Setanta Sports, and then within about 6 months or so, Setanta Sports, who had a big contract with the English Championship and a big contract with Scotland, they unfortunately went out of business, and then Sky Sports kind of came in and put a lot of money into the English Championship, but didn't put an awful lot of money back into the Scottish League. They kind of penalised the Scottish League by not making the TV contract that they negotiated after Setanta folded particularly high. And they haven't really invested in Scottish football ever since that time. So swapping to Amazon, I don't actually know when the Sky deal lapses with the Scottish Premier League and the Scottish league system, but certainly there is an argument for using a channel like Amazon. Obviously, it's got a global reach. It's not obviously not a channel that's going to go bankrupt like Setanta Sports did. Amazon also obviously has an interest in the Champions League. They have one Champions League game every week, so they share the coverage for that. I think there's a lot of merit in looking to see whether a channel like Amazon would buy the Scottish League TV coverage, and I think also getting rid of the 3 o'clock blackout is also a really good move. Really good move as well. Well, no, it's only I suppose Scotland on Tuesday we had Neil McCann, obviously, who is ex-Rangers. Stephen Thompson was one of the co-commentators. McFadden, who's obviously ex-Motherwell, ex-Everton. We have Kelly Cates Dalglish, who is a Celtic fan all her life. So she was a Celtic one. Stephen O'Donnell, who was on the panel. Leanne Crichton, who obviously is the Rangers ladies team manager, but she is an ex-Celtic player. So there was a bit of a mix of different clubs and different people. Lovenkrands, sorry, I forgot. I was trying to think who the other one was, but yes, Lovenkrands was one of the other ones. He obviously is ex-Rangers. I thought he actually was remarkably fair, 50-50. He wasn't particularly partisan to the Danish team. He sounds actually remarkably Scottish. I think he was kind of implying that his kids are actually Scottish rather than Danish. So anyway, interesting. Yeah, so Paul Boy, the woman on the panel is the Rangers women's team manager. I don't think she's a Rangers fan, as I say. My memory was that Leanne Crichton was a Celtic player earlier in her career, but I don't think she's got any particular loyalties to the Rangers team. I think she's just doing her job, managing her team, because she obviously was at Glasgow City, the other big team in Glasgow women's football, before moving to Rangers. And certainly there's a lot more freedom of movement between Glasgow City, Rangers and Celtic in terms of the women's game, which isn't really a factor in modern day men's team football in between Rangers and Celtic. Anyway, we're kind of deviating from the topic. The only thing that I would say in terms of TV coverage is the fact that the fact is that Celtic and Rangers are global teams, i.e., there are big fan groups for Celtic and Rangers in Canada, Australia, America, New Zealand. There are big amounts of Celtic fans and Rangers fans in all over Europe, also in the Far East as well. So I think there is a so possibly a big global TV company like Amazon, Netflix, who obviously are a big global brand. I think that's one reason they may think about buying the rights to Scottish football, is the fact that they then could start selling to Canada, America, New Zealand, where there are large number of Celtic fans and large number of Rangers fans and large numbers of Scottish people and Irish people who've emigrated out to those areas as well. I fully accept that she is the Rangers women's team manager. I just don't think she's got a loyalty to Rangers as such. But and her commentary and her punditry, for me, made perfect sense. And I don't think there was any kind of bias towards any particular team or bias against Celtic or bias against anybody. Anyway. But certainly Billy Dodds was on the radio, didn't listen to the radio, so I can't actually comment any further about that. I thought the commentator Liam McLeod did a perfectly good job. I thought the pundits did a perfectly good job. They all were partisan towards Scotland. I think they all clearly supported Scotland in the game. I think they left their club loyalties at the door. I think Neil McCann, Leanne Crichton took great pleasure in Kieran Tierney scoring that goal. I think they were when he saw the little coverage of the various different presenters sitting in the stands when Tierney scored the third goal and McLean scored the fourth goal. Stephen Thompson and McFadden were jumping up and celebrating. So I don't think there's any okay. Yes, you make a good point, Clashman Numpty, regarding the fact that the Scottish and British taxpayers did bail out Rangers. They got an incredible sweetheart deal from the courts in Scotland. They got an incredible sweetheart deal in the end from the British taxpayers. They got dealt with a lot more in a lot more friendly way than pretty much any other club who's gone bankrupt's ever been before. And particularly that was because the courts didn't actually enforce the full letter of the law on them. Anyway. Yep. That's something I thought Lovengrans was pretty much 50-50, and he sounded Scottish as well, and I think he did say in the commentary in his comments that his kids actually were Scottish, and that he supports Scotland in every other game apart from the games against Denmark previously, and he was kind of implying that his kids supported Scotland rather than Denmark. Yes, we could have had Scott Brown, we could have had Charlie Mulgrew. Charlie Mulgrew has been one of the pundits on other BBC Scotland things. Scott Brown's certainly done stuff more for Sky, I think, than BBC. Neil Lennon, obviously, has done things for various different channels. He's obviously a Celtic man. Chris Sutton's a Celtic person. John Hartson's more radio than anything else. Anyway. Somebody was asking, do I think we'll have the new manager in place by this time next week? Given the fact that this time next week we'll be playing Feyenoord in 5:45 kickoff in the Europa League, I doubt that we'll have I doubt we'll have the new manager in place for the Feyenoord match. A lot of the stories are that the plan is now to have the new manager in either for the Hibs match the following Sunday, so a week this Sunday, or possibly the game after that. I think it certainly would be very, very useful to have the new manager in for the Hearts game on the 7th of December and the St Mirren Cup final on the 14th of December, because that also, as I said earlier on, does allow us a lead into the January transfer window, which I think in terms of moving Celtic forward. Moving Celtic forward, I think the transfer window in January is going to be very important. And even more so, I think the summer 2026 transfer window is going to be even more important. So the longer the new manager has for January and the longer the new manager has for the summer, the better in terms of moving Celtic further and further forward. That certainly is what the Columbus Crew general manager said. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, because negotiations between clubs is supposed to be kept secret. And there's always this assumption that everything people say is completely true, when sometimes little white lies are required to keep things secret and behind the scenes, because anyway, my opinion is that it's perfectly possible that there has been no negotiations between the two clubs. It's also perfectly possible that things have been going on behind the scenes and it's not being shared on TV and media because they want to keep things secret and private whilst negotiations are going on. I think, as someone said about an hour and a half ago, midway through this live stream, there's an awful lot of people potentially who will be moving from Columbus, Ohio, America to Scotland, because Wilfried Nancy, if it is him, does tend to bring quite a number of his coaching staff and backroom staff with him. I think if we employed Kjetil Knutsen, which is another possibility, although he seems keener to stay in Norwegian football than move away, he also would bring quite a number of people with him as well. So I think it's a wee bit different from how it was with Ange Postecoglou, Neil Lennon, who pretty much just stuck with what was I? Sorry. Sorry, I got a bit distracted there. Sorry. So the difference, I think, would be with unlike with Ange Postecoglou and Neil Lennon, where they just kind of stuck with the staff that was already at the club. To be fair to Brendan Rodgers, he stuck with the staff that was still at Celtic. He did add one or two of his friends and ex-colleagues to the coaching staff over the first year or two. He brought in a few people like Paul Tidsdale, whom he knew from before, I think the guy was named Sadler or Sandler, a couple of other people, O'Driscoll, all of whom obviously moved on with him, along with John Kennedy. But he kind of used the existing coaching staff. I think if we did bring in particularly Knutsen or more likely Nancy, that they would actually bring in a lot of their own coaching staff with them. I think it's entirely possible that we've got a game in hand on Hearts. We've then got a game against Hearts on the 7th of December. Hearts are starting to run into one or two wee problems with their injuries. They're starting to run into one or two wee problems with yellow cards piling up and sort of disciplinary matters. So I think there's every possibility that if Celtic keep up the momentum they've got at the moment, be it we keep going with Martin O'Neill and Sean Maloney, I think that's turned things around in terms of Celtic. Just recently, from his time at Montreal and his time at Columbus Crew, when he's gone into those two clubs, he's changed things and moved things along really quickly. I think if Wilfried Nancy did come into Celtic, I think he would stick pretty much to the way that Celtic had been playing, and little by little over weeks and months instill his own way of playing football. So I think he would start using the same sorts of players and formations that have been working well under Maloney and O'Neill, and then little by little adapting things, particularly with the transfer window in January, and then more so in the summer transfer window. And I think there's also going to be a natural turnover of players, as we said earlier on. I think Maeda's on his way out, Hitati's on his way out, Yang's on his way out. Hopefully, my personal feeling is that we can try and keep hold of a few of the other players like Chiniecki and Engels and Trusty and Scales and Tierney and Johnston and so on, and then build around those players. And then a couple of years after that, again, there'll be a natural turnover of players over the years. I'd say the thing is that, to be fair to the various people who are appointing the new manager, we've not really rushed. It's about 3 weeks since Rodgers resigned, so it's not actually been a big rush to get the brand new manager in. It would appear, they have taken their time. They've looked at all the various different people who may have been interested. They've done their analysis. They've done their. It feels like they may well have explored who was interested and then gone out and talked to them in a preliminary fashion, and then they've kind of honed in, it would appear, on Wilfried Nancy. So I think they have taken their time up to a point. It felt much more when Rangers sacked Russell Martin. They seemed pretty much straight away to be canvassing for Gerrard and various other different options, Muscat and stuff, and then they went with Roll, then they changed their mind about Roll and then came back to Roll. So I think Rangers actually rushed their new manager in far quicker than Celtic have done. It feels like Celtic have taken their time. I think the negotiations to bring in Nancy or Knutsen would take a lot more longer than it would do bringing in a manager who is completely out of work. None of the candidates, apart from Ange Postecoglou, was out of a job. Ange Postecoglou, I think, told various different people that he didn't want a manager's job So soon after being sacked by Spurs and then sacked by Nottingham Forest, he was pretty much the only candidate that appeared to be possible for Celtic that was out of work. All the other ones that seemed to be getting put forward as potential candidates all had actual current jobs, be it at McKenna at Ipswich, Robbie Keane in Hungary, Knutson in Bodo Glimt, Nancy in Columbus Crew. Quite a few people put the guy Barry Murphy from Cardiff as a candidate. I find that one very difficult to believe, but again, a person who is in a job. So with it being a person who's would appear to be what we want as a player who's a manager who's currently in a full-time job, it's going to take longer to I don't think the holding up point for Nancy coming to Celtic will be the compensation fee. I think the more difficult thing for getting Nancy to come to Scotland is whether the rest of his coaching staff, etc., comes with him. I don't think Celtic's got a particular problem with Nancy bringing his coaching staff with him. I think it's the difficulty is getting all those people to leave America and come to live in Scotland. I think Nancy is keen to move away and come back to Europe. He's been living in North America for a long time. He's been over there for about the best part of 20 odd years. So personally, it's just my opinion. Obviously, I've got absolutely no knowledge at all. I'm just volunteering my opinion that I don't think that the £2 million compensation would be a factor that would hold Celtic up. Other people can have different opinions. I don't think that's going to be the factor. I think it's the factor that he wants to bring so many of his staff with him. That's going to be the holding up factor, simply because a lot of them won't want to come and live in Scotland. What I read was that it's been 3 years. Sorry, it's been 3 weeks since Rodgers left. That's probably about right, because obviously we had a couple of games. We had the European game. We've then had a 10-day break for the international break. So I think it probably is going to be the best part of 3 or even more than 3 weeks. We've had Falkirk and Kilmarnock and Midtjylland, and we've had the Rangers semi-final. So I think it's been the best part of 3 weeks since Rodgers left. I think sometimes when managers get sacked and new managers come in, that it's been prearranged, because obviously Ange Postecoglou got sacked by Spurs within a week or so. They had Thomas Franks coming from Brentford. Obviously, Nuno Espirito Santo got sacked in the morning, and by the afternoon, Ange Postecoglou was in to replace him at Nottingham Forest. Within a couple of days of Ange Postecoglou getting sacked, Sean Dyche came in to replace him. So I think at Spurs and at Nottingham Forest, I think they already had their new manager lined up at Spurs, and then the Nottingham Forest both times had their new manager lined up to replace them. Wolves, within about a week, 10 days, replaced their manager after sacking him. So I think those clubs had decided to sack their manager, and they already had done a lot of their negotiations prior to sacking their first manager. I think one way or another, Rodgers left rather unexpectedly and rather suddenly. So I don't think Celtic had a proper chance to actually prepare a new manager. So I don't think the money's that. I think, as I said, I think the factor that's holding up the deal is the maybe the reluctance of Wilfried Nancy's staff to come with him from America to Scotland, or Columbus Crew are not willing to let so many of their coaching and backroom staff leave the club all at once. There certainly have been quite a number of stories from supposed experts and insiders that know what's going on behind the scenes at Celtic, who are saying that the package to get everybody from Columbus Crew to come to Celtic is £2 million. I don't think it's the money. I think it's just all the negotiations to for all those people to come to cross the Atlantic and change their lives to come to manage and coach in Scotland. Obviously, leaving, if any of us were offered a job in America or a job in Canada, it's obviously, for anybody who's got kids or spouses, etc., it's actually quite a big upheaval to move everybody from one country to the other. If you've got kids who are at school, university, or whatever, that's obviously quite a big change as well. So, but I don't know. As I said, the more reading of all the various different newspaper sites and football websites and Celtic fan sites, the more I read of them, the more I feel all these people who claim to be insiders and know exactly what's going on behind the scenes, I think a lot of them are just guessing or making things up so they get clicks on their website, or they get people to buy their online articles and so on, or to subscribe to their channels. The good thing about the David 67 channel is that it's completely free of charge to be a subscriber or a viewer of the channel. It's completely free to share your opinions in the live stream. I noticed quite a few of the other, one particular live stream, the best way to get your comment read out is to pay them. That's certainly not the case on the David 67 channel. Pretty much everybody is willing and able to share their opinion. Fair enough. I haven't read all the articles or heard all the different bits and bobs from the general manager at Columbus Crew, so I don't know all the ins and outs. Certainly there's contrasting opinions as to how many years Wilfried Nancy has left on his contract at Columbus Crew. Some people are saying 1 year, some people are saying 2 years. Quite commonly in American sports, you have a 1 year contract with a 1 year option, or a 2 year contract with a 3rd year option. The player we were talking about a wee bit earlier on, Diego Rossi, he's got 1 more year left in his contract, but there is a 1 year extension offer on top of that if the club and the player both want it. So it may be that there is 2 years left on on Wilfried Nancy's contract. I don't know. All these things are generally kept secret and behind the scenes, much as would be the case with any of our salaries or our wages or our contracts, no matter with whom we work or don't work. In general terms, nobody else's contracts and wages and stuff gets put and shared in the press. Okay. I'm more than happy to accept that you say that's a fact. I've read 2026 and I've read 2027. 2027 seems more consistent with several of the other stories, but there have been different stories out there. But I'm perfectly happy to accept 2027 as being a fact. Again, I don't think it's. I don't think it's. I think in general terms, most clubs, be it a player or be it a manager or a coach, if the person wants to leave, it generally is counterproductive keeping people at a club as a player or as a manager when they don't want to be there anymore. I think that's been proven with people like maybe Maeda, maybe Hattati, maybe Kuhn, Odson Edward earlier on, Christopher Ayer earlier on. I think a lot of them haven't been so committed to the club when they've decided they want to leave. Yep. Okay. So there are contrasting stories. Obviously, the American Soccer League runs from spring through to late autumn, early winter. I think that the Major League Soccer is going to change the way their seasons are in the near future. So I think they are going to go more to a spring, summer, autumn league, which kind of mirrors quite a lot of the other professional leagues in other sports in America. Oh dear. I think it's a perfectly reasonable opinion. I would personally, I would be much happier that we got this sorted out much sooner rather than later. Some people are saying that Celtic should wait for the right person. So a lot of people aren't convinced that Wilfried Nancy is the best person. We did do a poll on the channel about a week ago. When I last looked, it was 60% thought that Wilfried Nancy was a good choice for Celtic manager, and 40% of the people who voted thought that that Wilfried Nancy wasn't a good choice for Celtic manager. So there does seem to be a split opinion among Celtic fans, at least those who voted on the channel, as to whether it's a good or bad move for Celtic. There are quite a lot of people who are saying we should keep Martin O'Neill for as long as we can. I think that it might make a lot of sense in the short term. But in terms of the next couple of transfer windows, I think getting in a new manager is the best option. And I think the existing players that Celtic have got are good enough to win the league, no matter who the manager is, be it Martin O'Neill, be it Wilfried Nancy, be it whomever it might be. I think any manager who is more than half decent could manage this team if they get them motivated to good enough to win the league. Well, as I said, some people don't feel that Major League Soccer is particularly strong. A lot of people didn't think the J League's particularly strong. We've got a number of very good players in from the J League: Maeda, Hattati, Kyogo, Tomoki Iwata. I thought he was a very good player. Just didn't get much of a chance at Celtic. Japanese players have played for a lot of the biggest teams all over Europe. So J League certainly is a strong league. I think there's a lot of quality of players in Major League Soccer. Quite a lot of Eastern European players have gone there. Quite a lot of South Americans and Central Americans have gone there. I think the Major League Soccer is a strong league. As I said, the people who do analysis on leagues for quality of players, quality of games, etc., have Major League Soccer as the 10th best league in the world, which I think is considerably miles ahead of Scotland. Scotland in that table was about 29th. And that's partly because the teams underneath Celtic, Rangers, Hearts, Aberdeen, certainly Celtic, Rangers, Hearts, Hibs, is so considerably low. The teams in our lower divisions are very, very poor. Yes, so as Clashman is saying, Scotland's a long, long way below, the Major League Soccer. In that table, the English Championship was number 7. The English Premier League was number 1. We are falling further and further down the World League in terms of quality and the World League in terms of prestige. I don't know what parameters the Opta stats people based it on, but that's what they came out with. And certainly all the other places did seem to make good sense, i.e. the Serie A, Ligue 1, Bundesliga, La Liga were all right at top of the charts. Scotland's league was way, 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 way down. America was in at 10th. Yes, you make a good point that the guy from Bournemouth did invest at Hibs. As best of my knowledge, he's sold his interest in Hibs back to the people who are currently at Hibs. So he's actually pulled his money back out of Hibs. I don't think the person who was the main shareholder and owner of Bournemouth actually had an awful lot of money of his own. Obviously, Tony Bloom, who's at Hearts, has interest at Hearts, Brighton, and in Union Saint-Gilloise in Belgium. He's obviously got quite a bit of money to spread around. I don't think the Bournemouth guy had an awful lot of money of his own. I don't think he would have the money, anywhere near big enough money to buy out Dermot Desmond or to buy out majority shareholding in Celtic. I think one of the other things, as I said a wee bit earlier on with Dermot Desmond, is he must have other people on the board who vote with him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have remained in charge of Celtic for the last 30 years, well, 25 years or so, maybe a wee bit more longer since he bought it off Fergus McCann. Yes, so I fully, as is quite often the case, I fully agree with you. I think the sooner we get someone in, the better. It would be really nice if tomorrow or today, I think we've moved into Friday, in terms of the live stream. I think it would be really good if at the AGM tomorrow, Michael Nicholson or Peter Lawwell or Mackay, the chief financial officer, somebody said, this is where we are in terms of recruiting Wilfried Nancy. We are just about to announce the deal. It would be great if that happened. I have my doubts that's what's going to happen tomorrow, but you never know. The catering, to the best of my knowledge, actually is done by a company who does catering all over the place. It's not actually, Celtic don't actually have a catering manager as such. They subcontract it to a multinational company who do catering for lots and lots of football lots and lots of football clubs, lots and lots of race courses. They do it for lots of music festivals, all kinds of things. So all the sort of the food kiosks and stuff at Celtic are run by a separate independent company. If from his reputation, from his time at Montreal and at Columbus Crew, and all the plaudits and praise that he's getting from lots of very, very highly esteemed coaches and ex-players, etc. A lot of people say that Wilfried Nancy is a very good coach, a very good motivator, a very good tactician. He is very, very good with analysis of teams, his players. He copes very well moving from one team to the other. He gets his message over to the players very quickly. So I think the sooner somebody comes in, the better. I think also with it dragging on and on and on, that creates a bit of uncertainty as well. So I think, and as I say, I think the transfer window in January is going to be important, mostly because we're going to be losing players, I think, in the transfer window in January. And I think we are going to need to replace 2 or 3 players that we're going to lose: Hatate, Maeda, Yang, maybe. So I think getting someone in as soon as possible, and as Clashman Numpty is suggesting, no matter when we move from one manager to another, it's going to be not the ideal time. I think throwing the new manager in with his first game being an away game against Feyenoord in Holland, maybe not the best idea. Possibly first game being the game against Hibs, not a bad idea. Possibly his first game being the game against Hearts, not such a good idea. But he's got to come in at some point, and for me, the sooner the better. And there's always going to be an excuse for, we should wait a bit longer, we should wait a bit longer, we should wait a bit longer. One of the stories I've read is there are 3 French clubs lined up to try to sign Wilfried Nancy to be their boss. None of those clubs, from what I can recall, are the sort of the top level teams in France. And so it would appear that if Wilfried Nancy does want to move from America to European football, that Celtic may be the top of his list. However, if Celtic do dither and keep on putting things off and leaving Martin O'Neill in charge for another week and another week and another week, it may be we'll lose Wilfried Nancy altogether, and he ends up going to one of the 3 French clubs supposedly looking to sign him. I personally don't see Brendan Rodgers ever coming back to be Celtic's manager. I don't think he would come back to the club. I think he's massively fallen out with Dermot Desmond, who reportedly was a very good mate of his. The 2 of them apparently got on very, very well. They were socially very friendly. I suspect that those 2 have burned all their friendship bridges, etc., between the 2 of them. Yes. I think Ren or Reims were one or the other, or possibly both, were the ones who were reportedly after Nancy. Ren, from what I can recall, and maybe not fully accurate, were towards the bottom of the top French division. However, they do have they have a very, very rich owner, which is partly why they were able to support to pay to get Jota out of the Saudi leagues, come to them, and able then to spend £10 million to get Kyogo to come from Celtic to their club. So I think they've got lots and lots of money. Part of the thing also with Kyogo is they bought Kyogo, but they then bought several other strikers to take his place. I thought it was Reims rather than Rennes, but there were 3 teams listed as all being supposedly, interested in getting in Nancy to be their manager, Nancy to be their manager. I very much hope that's true. I think that obviously when Brendan Rodgers left us, we were quite adrift beneath Hearts. I think it's slightly false at the moment because Celtic do have a game in hand. If we were to win that game in hand, it gets an awful lot closer. If we beat Hearts on the 7th of December, that gets incredibly much closer. I think, as I said earlier on, I think Hearts are going to run into problems with injuries, suspensions, etc. I think also that if Celtic's new manager and his backroom staff are any good, I think they also will analyse how Hearts have been playing and develop better ways of counteracting what Hearts do. I don't think Brendan Rodgers set the team up particularly well to counteract what Hearts had been doing well all season. We seem to be pretty clueless at defending long throws into the box. Braga and Kiziridis, both very talented players, driving at our defenders. Quite a number of Celtic's defenders did a poor job. Our midfielders did a very poor job tracking back to help out in midfield and help out in defence. So I think Hearts did a good. I think McInnes and his team knew how to play against Celtic. I don't think Rodgers knew how to play against the new version of Hearts. I'm pretty sure that be it O'Neill and Maloney or whomever comes in for December the 7th will have got the team much better set up. So we've been going for nearly 4 hours. It's now well into Friday morning. I did promise Mrs. David 67 that we were going to have a shorter than usual live stream today. So it's nearly 1 o'clock in the morning on Friday. So I think we will call it a day. So next Thursday, we're playing against Feyenoord away from home, but that will be a 5:45 kickoff. And so I'm still planning to have the live stream at 9 o'clock on next Thursday evening, maybe 9:30. But what I will do, a wee advert before I'll do a wee advert on Wednesday and a wee reminder advert on Thursday morning. But still planning to have a live stream at 9 o'clock or 9:30 next Thursday. I have to say that the live stream, the second half of the live stream has been, I thought, a lot. I think the second half of the live stream has been much more jovial, much more friendly, much more the kind of thing that Celtic's live stream should be, i.e. friendly, respectful, honouring everybody's opinions, sharing everybody's opinions. No, I will be allowed anyway. So I think we'll call it a day anyway. Thank you to everybody who's contributed. Thank you for everybody on the live stream who's kept things pleasant, respectful, etc. So that is something I've thought about is doing a watch along. However, my family who obviously are in the house or in the room when I've been watching Celtic matches, particularly any Celtic match that's tense and nervous, the language I use is the language I use is often a bit not very family friendly, and for that reason, that's why I've never done a watch along. In that I sometimes get a bit carried away, and sometimes the language I use at the players or particularly at the referees or the opposition isn't terribly nice. So thank you very much, Clashman Numpty. Thank you very much, Paul Boy 67. Thank you very much, everybody else. Charol XGary23, thank you to Sligo Boy, thank you for coming back to the channel after my inadvertent mistake. Thank you to Pope Leo XV. Thank you to everybody. And let's see, thank you, Sligo Boy, for coming back to the channel. Thank you for being so forgiving. And so I think we'll call it a day at nearly 1 o'clock in the morning. And let's see, we'll go. So call it a day. Thank you for everybody who's contributing. Thank you for everybody who's been so pleasant, friendly, supportive. Thank you for everybody who's given me nice positive feedback. It really does cheer me up and encourage me to keep on going. And so until next Thursday around 9 o'clock, hopefully celebrating a win or a draw against Feyenoord, hopefully knowing what's happening in terms of our new manager. And so until next Thursday, goodbye and hail, hail.